Good evening. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets? I don't believe so.
Madam Chair, there are no regrets.
Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll proceed. There's no consent items and no confidential, obviously. So we'll start with Commissioner Garvey, if you carry on.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Duddick and members of the committee. This evening we will hear a brief what was heard over the last couple of weeks of consultations, and the team will also walk through the planning tools that will bring Midtown to life. Our journey here centers around developing a preferred concept and demonstration plan that will feed into a new official plan amendment for consideration of council. This process gathers the input and feedback from all the interested parties and stakeholders and portrays that feedback into a single concept. Not everyone will agree to the direction, but everyone's voice is important as we seek common ground towards a concept that's desirable and defensible. It's also important to note that while the committee's work will end, council's work will continue as the concept is translated into an official plan amendment and is presented to council and the public through the regular public meetings, and ultimately a consideration of a formal recommendation. There's still more work to be done, but I can truly express my appreciation for the passion and caring that has been demonstrated over the course of this process by its participants. It will and has been an enriching experience for all. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Jeff to walk through the presentation.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time this evening. So we're just going to go through a quick agenda where we are in the process for the official plan amendment, some of the work that we've done to date, and as Neil mentioned, we're going to be sharing some information from the public information centers that we had hosted in the past couple of weeks. And then we're going to go through a discussion of what the planning framework and toolbox looks like to achieve a lot of the items that we've heard from the public, in particular how it relates to the official plan amendment, especially in the context of the broader development process. So some of the work done to date, obviously this is now the 5th committee of the whole, and so in the past month when we came here, we had presented 3 draft land use concepts. We had then subsequently went out to the public to share those in late November. We had also shared those with our technical advisory committee as well as our developers as part of our stakeholder outreach. And so where that puts us now in the process, we're now in phase 3. We are starting to work through our preferred option. We've gathered a lot of feedback from public and the members of our stakeholder groups. Some of that feedback is still ongoing or coming to us on those land use concepts, but we're beginning work on the preferred option. And so just a recap of that public information center that we had held on November 24th, 28th, and 29th. So we engaged residents of your community on 3 land use block concepts. The intent was to share likes and dislikes in smaller roundtable discussions. And we had a short voting activity at the end, but the purpose was really to identify why a concept was preferred, what they liked about it, what they maybe didn't like, and then what elements they would want to combine of the 3 concepts that were shared. And at those, out of those 3 events, we had a total of 117 participants. About 49% indicated that they were first-time attendees to the Midtown process. Thus far, actually, as of last week when we had uploaded this presentation, we had about 14 people complete the online survey. That's still open until the end of this week. And there's now about 30 people that have completed it to date. With the events, in person, we had reached all 5 area codes of Oakville, and it was broadly distributed across the town. And so in that sort of voting activity, we heard a lot from residents about what they liked, what they disliked, and just, we'll be preparing a broader synthesis of all that information. In particular, the likes and dislikes are particularly important for our process as we develop a preferred concept. But just in terms of the voting, we had 96 people vote. A lot of the direction was towards concept A with about 51% of the votes. But of course, there were good reasons for some of the other options as well that we'll be taking into account as we go through our process. So with that, I will pass it off to my colleague Lee, who will walk through some of the planning context for the OPA.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. As Jeff described, we had a lot of great conversations with the stakeholders and the community this November as we discussed those various land use concepts. And our team's going to take some time with that feedback. So the content that I'll be presenting today isn't about the concepts themselves, but rather is kind of taking a level up to help us understand the planning framework more broadly, and to help us have a bit of an educational focus to situate the work that we're doing within to put that OPA within the broader land use planning context as a whole. And the reason being is that we've gotten lots of really great questions as we've gone through this process around various levels of planning detail. And we thought this was a good opportunity to take some time and provide some clarity as to the role of the official plan amendment in managing growth in Midtown, and what tools and abilities the town has to manage other aspects of growth outside of this process in particular. So I'll be doing this in kind of two parts. One will be going back to some kind of foundations of planning about the role of planning at the municipal level, clarifying the different layers of policy where the municipality has the most influence. And then with that foundation, we're going to look at some more tangible questions that we've heard through this process and describe what the role that the OPA will have, and then also point to what other strategies the Midtown Implementation Program itself will develop, as well as other existing tools and strategies that the town has at its disposal. Pardon me. So taking it back to first principles, and I will please ask council to indulge me, as I'm sure some of this information you'll be very familiar with, but for the benefit of everyone here to understand how this all kind of comes together, I thought it would be really valuable to review. So the planning department here at the town, or through consultants like myself, largely has two major areas of responsibility. We see in one grouping in blue is the writing, updating, and reviewing of policies, bylaws, guidelines, and standards that guide development. And the other grouping in purple is the processing and reviewing of applications against those standards, as well as the policy standards of other levels of government, so provincial, regional, et cetera. And in most instances, staff make recommendations that come back to council for action, and council makes a decision on those matters. And what is the basis of those recommendations that staff or a consultant like myself is making? The basis of that is guided by the overall land use planning framework in Ontario. And that sets out the very legislative basis for planning, who has what power, what processes we have at our disposal, and it sets the shape of those processes that we undertake. And that includes a range of policies that planners have to consider and evaluate as applications come forward in their recommendations. And the framework broadly sets up what processes the town itself has particular control over. And developing an official plan or an official plan amendment, like we're doing now through Midtown, is one of those processes, again, responding to the whole hierarchy that's established within the planning framework itself. So we'll take a closer look at that framework so we can understand the bigger picture and all of the processes that the town has in its control to undertake, and what, in addition to official plan direction, that the town can craft or shape to manage development. And I'll walk through each one of these and layers with a couple pieces of commentary. So each one of these boxes you see here operates at a different level of detail, which is important to keep in mind. And they establish different levels of authority, and there's different requirements that play a different but interrelated and complementary role. So in the blue are policies and plans that are crafted by the province or the region or the town. And in the purple, as we saw on the previous slide, are processes that are initiated by external actors. So think of development applications that are brought forward for the town's consideration. So that reflects that dual role we saw before of plan making and also evaluating applications against the framework. So at the very top, we have a few key laws that apply throughout the province that establish a really important legal basis for the foundation of land use planning, what its objectives are, how the process works, and what different entity has various powers over what. And the town cannot control the laws established by the province. The municipality is, as we say, a creature of the province, and it's established through these laws. So the most important one, I would say, is the Planning Act, and that establishes various land use planning processes. The Places to Grow Act is also noted here, and that's the legislative basis for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which is an important policy document. And there's also the Development Charge Act, which is the legislative basis for the ability to collect development charges, which we'll talk about throughout this presentation as well. So moving down from the legislative basis, we get down to provincial policies and plans. And these are plans that the province authors related to land use planning in Ontario. And we have the provincial policy statement here, which applies to the province as a whole, and it sets out broad directions on land use planning. Many topics are addressed, including efficient use of land and infrastructure, housing, environment, economic development, the appropriate infrastructure that's required to support communities. And it's important to remember that land use policies and decisions by lower tiers of governments must be consistent with the PPS. Also at the provincial level is the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And I've mentioned this plan in previous presentations. This is a special provincial plan. The province can make plans for wherever it likes within the province. So this is special for the GGH. And it was first released in 2006 following the Places to Grow Act of 2005. And it sets out a specific vision for the Greater Golden Horseshoe itself with the intent to protect the Greenbelt and really focus intensification and complete communities with access to higher order transit. And one of the notable things about the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe was the establishment of this concept of urban growth centers, of which Midtown is one of a network of 25. And that's a main feature of that plan, where we really start to focus on concentrating development around higher order transit investment. And like with the PPS, a little bit different here, land use policies and decisions must conform to the directions of the growth plan. So we're moving down in the hierarchy now to the regional level. So Oakville is in a two-tiered municipality. So we have the region of Halton, which manages region-wide land use matters, and the local communities, Burlington, Oakville, Halton Hills, Milton, all look after local matters. So in the world of land use planning, the region deals with matters that affect more than one municipality. So the region has its own official plan, which is guided again through the Planning Act, which establishes what is in the official plan and how that works. And they deal with matters of regional interest, intensification, growth planning, transportation, environment, and other regional matters. And the region's official plan has to be consistent with the PPS, conform to the growth plan, and not conflict with any applicable provincial plans. And the Oakville official plan must conform to the upper tiers regional plan. So now we're getting into the Oakville layer. So highlighted in red here is the official plan and the zoning bylaw, which are the primary land use tools that the town has to set expectations for growth and for building standards. And as we've established, the town's framework, including the OP and the zoning bylaw, has to be consistent with the PPS, conform to the growth plan, and conform to the region's OP. They're all very interconnected in that manner. So in addition to the OP and the zoning bylaw, there's a number of other bylaws that are within the city's purview to develop, which play a role in land use planning processes. So those are here up on the screen, and I'll spend a little bit more time with them on this slide and on the next. The ones in the dark blue, the town has in place now, and these deal with some of the more details of the planning process. So parkland dedication, for instance, outlines how you actually go about acquiring parkland and upon what calculation it's made and how cash in lieu works and those types of details. And the ones that are in light blue are bylaws that the town doesn't yet have in place, but it has the ability to create those bylaws should it wish. What's also included in this big red box that's dotted out here in gray are urban design guidelines. And the reason that these are not blue is because they're what we call non-statutory documents, which means that they don't have a basis coming out of a statute, in this case, the Planning Act. The Planning Act doesn't say a municipality shall have urban design guidelines. So they're discretionary. And they don't carry the same weight as an official plan policy. They're additive to the development process, but they are really helpful to add more detail and clarification for the development community to outline your expectations for a variety of matters. And then finally, down here in the purple again, this is, again, our color that talks about things that are externally influenced. This case, we're talking about planning approvals and planning applications. So the town and the region and the province set the policy context, but these policies alone don't make buildings appear. The town relies on external actors to come forward, whether that be developers, home builders, individuals coming forward for minor variance, et cetera. They come to the town with a proposal for development. And the Planning Act enables these amendments, and it sets out how we process those amendments. And then the staff evaluate them based on the planning framework itself, and then make recommendations to council to make decisions. And ultimately, those are the elements within the planning process that are subject to appeal at the OLT. So that's the big picture. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time, given our focus on the tools within the town's control, on this slide with a little bit more description. So the Oakville enacts the official plan and has the opportunity, as we're doing through the Midtown process, to make amendments to that official plan. And that's our primary tool to guide land use at a high level and manage growth, set your expectations. And those official plan directions also influence other town-wide master plans, which are used to direct certain services that the town delivers. And we have listed here the fire master plan, transportation master plan, the parks, recreation, and library master plan. And so these streams of work are influenced by the directions of the OP at a broad level. And then the town prepares various bylaws, as we've described, whether it be the zoning bylaw, which is a primary land use tool, and then a number of other bylaws to influence or to enable certain abilities of the town to, for instance, extract development charges or community benefits charges. You need to have a bylaw in place in order to allow you to do those things. And moving on again here, a little bit more detail about how the official plan directions inform other town processes. So it's important to remember that, the town, as we've established through the big framework, isn't alone here as an actor. It's acting with the region, it's acting with other departments within the town who are undertaking those master plans, and also with other public actors, such as those school boards and hospitals and whatnot. And so as the official plan directions inform other processes, the processes also feed into regional planning processes. So for instance, for water, wastewater, transportation, and other services. And planning is done with these, planning for the OP is done with these other services in mind. And also the directions of the OP then influence how these other actors then plan as well. And they also inform, as we covered before, development charges. They will more greatly specify what development charges can be used for. So it's the greater levels of detail that we go into. So there's a lot of interconnection between the OPA and other town planning processes, and all these stakeholders, so the region, schools, for instance, are embedded in our process. And we are working hand in hand to make sure we understand the process that they're going through as well, so that the recommendations and the process that we're going through for the Midtown OPA is connected with those other actors as well. So with that context in mind, we'll try to take it back to ground a little bit more. I know that's a lot of information, but hopefully helpful just to remind ourselves and contextualize where the OPA sits within the broader framework. So in this part, I'll give some examples of how the framework plays a role in planning for Midtown. So our scope right now includes the official plan amendment development. But it's only one tool, as we've described, that the town has to manage growth. So here we'll elaborate on the role of the OPA and the role of the future work in the Midtown implementation process itself. So there's other work to be done that gets into greater levels of detail. And then I'll hit on some of the other processes or tools that relate to various topics of interest. So we've gathered a number of different questions or topics that have been asked of us through this process to kind of hopefully give some more tangible examples of what the OPA can do to address these questions, what future Midtown implementation work will do, and what other avenues the town has at its disposal. So first, with regards to land use, identifying land use is one of the primary roles of what the OPA will do. So through the official plan amendment, it can guide the permitted uses throughout Midtown. It'll establish what that mix of uses looks like and encourages or directs other uses to specific areas to reflect certain character. And will also speak to enabling new uses while allowing existing uses to continue to remain until they're ready to develop. In terms of what other work the Midtown implementation process will do to add more detail to this, I'll point to the Midtown zoning bylaw. So part of the implementation process, a work that hasn't yet been undertaken, but is part of the overall work plan within Jacob's umbrella, is a development of a zoning bylaw. So this will get down into that finer level of detail. So it will provide detailed permitted uses as well as other building standards, as we're familiar with what zoning bylaws do. And then again, in terms of related tools and processes, we go back to our purple or blue. So here we have a purple dot representing development applications. So through future development applications, this is how we actually see land use implemented. Someone's going to come forward with an application. The town will assess these applications based on the enforced policies, including the land use policies, and make recommendations for council for approval or refusal. The next topic is built form. Lots of great questions about what Midtown will look like. What are the buildings going to be like? The official plan amendment itself will have language that can include built form expectations. So what's required for development? Is this a podium point tower type of building? Are they mid-rise types of buildings? You know, what kind of directions can we provide for built form to support a pedestrian environment? And language within the official plan amendment can help us do that. The OPA will also build on existing policies. The town has lots of good existing direction in your official plan that would still be applicable to any application coming forward for Midtown. And we also consider policies to help minimize impacts of development in built form, you know, such as shadows or wind. And we'll establish the various studies that are required for development to provide as they make applications to demonstrate appropriate built form considerations. But the OPA isn't the end, of course, in terms of how built form can be managed in Midtown. So there is future work. Again, I'll point to the zoning bylaw that will be developed, and that gets down again to that more granular level of detail. So talking about things like step backs, heights, and setbacks. Height will also be in the OPA as well, but we also include that in a zoning bylaw. There will be a set of urban design guidelines developed for Midtown called Designing Midtown. So these are a special document for Midtown that will further shape and describe how built form is intended to be expressed here. And then again, looking to related tools and processes through future applications, pardon me. Applicants may seek to create site-specific standards for a proposal. And the town, I'm just going to make an ask for anyone that might have a lozenge. No? Cough drop? Okay. If you have one, please let me know. I'll make it through. So the town will assess these applications against the enforced policies, including those built form policies. And again, make recommendations related to that. Height and density, so similar to built form. The official plan amendment can speak to height and density requirements, transition, locate where, thank you very much, Jane, where highest density should be located. And that's direction that we frequently see at an official plan level of detail. Again, it will also elaborate on what studies are to be required to demonstrate appropriate height and density. And I'll point to the similar tools that we did in built form for the future work of the Midtown implementation program. So the zoning bylaw, again, is another one of those tools to help us manage height and density, as is the Designing Midtown document. And similarly, development applications are how this is implemented. Just going to take a quick pause with my lozenge and get it to work. So we've been asked quite a bit about affordable housing in Midtown, and it's a really important question for any growth area, especially these days. Inclusionary zoning is one method that we have available to secure affordable housing, but IZ requires additional processes beyond the OPA itself. Inclusionary zoning is applicable, as established in the Planning Act, for protected major transit station areas, of which Midtown is one. What the official plan amendment can do is set up the enabling language to enable inclusionary zoning policies. In addition to that, there's nothing stopping anyone who wishes to create an affordable building from coming forward to doing so. The official plan amendment policies can encourage a range and mix of housing types and tenures, and also support potentially different development standards. For instance, reduced parking standards or other things that makes lands more easily achievable to make affordable housing. But affordable housing, it's really important to note that this is a town-wide issue. It's not just a Midtown issue. And with that in mind, look to other related tools and processes that the town already has underway to help kind of get onto this issue and understand how to do what the town has in its ability to help advance affordable housing. So IZ, the inclusionary zoning bylaw, this is one of those bylaws that's in light blue because it doesn't yet exist, can be implemented, and it is required. There's an assessment report and other pieces that are required to implement it, but that is something that can be implemented in Midtown. The Housing Strategy and Action Plan is an existing stream of work that the town is undertaking now, and that's a draft strategy which outlines a number of different housing-related policies, regulations, and programs to address housing need in Oakville, and one of its recommendations is strengthening official plan policies and enabling inclusionary zoning. So the town is already working on this in other areas. The Rental Housing Protection Bylaw and Demolition Control Bylaw is a new bylaw that was passed here in July, and that seeks to preserve existing rental housing, which is one of the many things that we can do to try and protect existing housing stocks that's generally more affordable than new rental housing. And then in purple, again, through external actors, through development applications in the future, the town has the ability through a community benefits charge to potentially use that contribution towards affordable housing if that's what it chooses. Similar to affordable housing, housing unit mix has been asked to us as well. How can we make housing suitable for families or larger units? So again, the official plan amendment, the policies itself are a bit limited in terms of what exactly it will do. But it can encourage a range of mix of housing types and tenures, including larger units and different types of housing to meet the needs of people in various stages of their life. But I'll again point to this being a town-wide topic and a number of other things, including that housing strategy and action plan that the town has underway now that speak to housing unit mix. So again, embedded in that strategy are a number of different recommendations that relate to this very question. And then also that rental housing protection bylaw is one of the things the town's already enacted to help preserve some of those pre-existing units that may be of a larger housing stock. Parks and open space, we often get questions about this. What will the parks look like? Will they be public? How do we make sure there's adequate parkland? So in terms of what we can expect from the OPA, it will establish a vision for Midtown's parks and public realm. And we'll also identify potential locations for future parks and open spaces. And we'll have a whole section in the OPA that describes the Parks and Open Space Network and what its expectations are. But there's a couple of other more detailed documents that will come through the Midtown Implementation Program that will get into even greater detail. One is the Midtown Parks and Public Realm Master Plan. So we'll take the directions from the OPA and that network of parks, and we'll get into a greater level of detail. So more specific design guidance for those parks and open spaces. And then in terms of how do we actually get the parks, part of the implementation program includes a municipal land acquisition strategy. So as we've discussed in the past, there's limitations to what amount of parkland that can be extracted through development, through what's possible through the parkland dedication bylaw. So this strategy will help the town identify what's achieved through development and what other strategies or tools they have at their disposal to be able to acquire additional lands. And then related tools and processes here, so pointing to the parkland dedication bylaw, just connecting the dots back to what the framework that we described before, the townwide master plan related to parks, library, and rec. That's the master plan that guides more specific role and function of these spaces and connects into how development charges are used. And then through development applications, that's where the town is able to extract development charges and community benefits charges, which could potentially be used towards parks and open space improvements. In terms of sustainability, the official plan amendment, like the OPA itself, can support sustainability by promoting a type and form of development that promotes higher densities and mixed use permissions near to transit to reduce automobile dependency, which in terms of the housing typology that it is promoting, will cause less GHGs than equivalent houses, let's say in a grade related form. It will also reduce destruction of Ontario farmland and natural habitats. This is part of the thrust of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe in particular, was to create more complete communities with access to transit, so that we're building in less land-intensive ways, so that we can protect other types of land uses, like farmland and natural areas. And the OPA will also build on various existing OP policies that seek to protect natural heritage systems, like 60 Mile Creek. And there's also additional work within the Midtown Implementation Program that will contribute to how sustainable development is encouraged in Midtown. And that includes the Midtown Community Energy Plan, so that's another part of the implementation program that's planned, that will review district energy concepts and think about how Midtown can contribute to the town's town-wide community energy strategy. So in terms of related tools and processes, the town has a community-wide energy strategy, which is a guiding document that speaks to these types of goals. And then also through development applications in the site plan control stream, the town can comment on sustainable design elements of buildings through that process to encourage those that are coming forward with development to do better in terms of sustainable measures. Public realm, what will living and walking around Midtown feel like? So here again, similar to built form, we'll build on existing policies and provide directions with regard to public realm elements, encouraging landscaping and public art and open spaces. And our schedules within the OPA may also require certain areas to have special treatment or active streetscapes or support the public realm in special ways. These are the types of character distinctions that we can describe in the official plan amendment. And there are a number of other elements through the implementation program that will further define how public realm is designed. So that parks and public realm plan that I mentioned before, this also will speak to, obviously, the public realm and getting into more detail about how that functions. Those designing Midtown, the urban design guidelines, will also be a piece that speaks about more public realm details. And also, the Midtown Transportation Plan, through the establishment of the street rights-of-way, will set parameters for those streetscapes, which are a large part of where our public realm happens on those sidewalks within the streets. So that plan is an important one to think of as well. And then in terms of related processes, again, through development applications, the town is an active body in making comments on applications that come forward. And so staff can reinforce the policy and guideline direction, and the town can also receive community benefits charges, which can be used for public realm improvements over time. We've been asked quite a bit about schools and where the schools will be. Will there be schools to accommodate new students? And to be very clear, the development of new schools is undertaken by the school boards. We work in partnership with them through the official plan amendment process. They're part of our technical advisory committee, and we've been meeting with them through this. So the official plan amendment itself can permit the development of new schools and identify school locations, but that also continues through ongoing work with the school boards. The OPA can also reflect policy directions made in consultation with the school boards, and also build on existing official plan policies that require community services and facility studies, which through doing that, you identify school capacity and understand the need at the time as part of development applications. So detailed planning for schools, as I mentioned, will be done by the school boards, but we are working in consultation with them through the OPA process. And part of the future Midtown implementation program will include a mixed-use school strategy. And that's really meant to be a bit of a think piece to kind of start to think about how more compact schools can be made in Midtown, and what are the challenges and opportunities related to those. And again, in terms of related processes, we point to the school boards and their process of planning for schools through their long-term accommodation plans. And then they go through their typical process with the ministry in order to build new schools. Similar to schools, community facilities, a very important piece of what Midtown will have in the long term. So the town already monitors community needs as growth occurs. The official plan amendment will add to that, and establish priority locations for large-scale community facilities, such as libraries or recreation centers. It can establish the importance of providing a full range of these community facilities. recommend mixed-use integration of these services. So as things come forward over time, we can point to the policies of the official plan and say, no, this rec center and this library could really be less land intensive and more successful in the community if they're co-located on a site, for instance. That kind of policy direction can live in the OPA. And we'll also build on existing policies that require community services and facility studies that are prepared as part of development applications. So this continues to be monitored, not just on the town on its own, but through development applications. So the OPA content, again, is being coordinated with community service providers, including fire services, Halton Healthcare, and their long-term planning direction does take direction from the OPA. Future community facilities will be planned for and delivered by the public sector or in partnership with private development. And so there's a number of different tools and processes here related to community facilities, pointing back to that townwide master plan related to parks, library, and recreation. This is where we get into the specifics about the town's needs overall. Halton Regional Health Services, in terms of healthcare and police, they maintain master plans for those topics. The town regularly updates its fire master plan to ensure emergency services are being planned for in growing areas. And then through development applications, the town again collects those development charges, which can be used for various townwide services, including rec, libraries. And through development applications, again, we can receive community benefit charges, which can be used either for in-kind realization of community facilities, like a daycare, for instance, within a building, or for contributions in terms of dollars for community facilities. One of the great things about a growth center like Midtown is we're talking about vibrancy and we're talking about vitality in terms of retail. So how can the official plan amendment really speak to that? Again, this is a matter of narrative and speaking to the importance of retail environments, urban design considerations that really speak to this, and speak to the relationship between buildings, public realm, and success of retail areas. We can describe the character of areas within Midtown, including the retail character, and establish areas where retail is required or encouraged in particular to achieve the vision that we want for Midtown. And then other work, again, of the implementation program will contribute to defining the future retail environment. So again, looking at that Designing Midtown document. So this is the urban design guidelines. They can include more direction for components of retail stores and glazing amounts, public realm contributions, specific design elements. And then the zoning bylaw can also carry more specific direction around those types of uses. And through the development applications, this is where development comes forward to the town. They'll be assessed based on all of the enforced policy and guidelines, and recommendations, again, will be made to council. But we'll have that direction in the OP, the zoning, and the design guidelines that can help establish what the vision is for retail. Transportation and transit, again, a huge topic of interest and lots of questions to us related to this. So in terms of what the OPA will do, it can lay out the long-term transportation vision and the network plans in terms of streets and active transportation routes, and that will be represented in schedules and policies. We can describe how it will accommodate movement of all kinds in Midtown, including cycling infrastructure, and we'll also build on various existing official plan policies that require transportation studies, which will be part of the development application requirements. So again, this is another topic that's assessed at the time of application. And there's quite a bit of additional work that will come through the implementation program. The OPA is also being coordinated with transportation study. And in addition to the OPA, we have the Midtown Transportation Plan, which will refine Midtown's automotive, transit, and active transportation networks. And then also through the zoning bylaw, different types of requirements for parking, for instance, or bicycle parking can be embedded within there as well, which is a transportation transit matter. A number of other processes related here as well, connecting up to the regional level at the integrated master plan, the town-wide transportation master plan, are both other public elements that relate to transportation and transit more broadly. And again, through development applications and development charges, the town can collect those charges for various town-wide services, including transit and roads. Servicing capacity, sufficient wastewater and water capacity. So how will the official plan amendment identify and deal with servicing issues? We'll lay out the long-term land use permissions, which then inform servicing planning. And we'll also provide guidance on rights of way for servicing infrastructure, so where within those streets are those pipes going to go. We'll build on various OP policies that require alignment of development with phased infrastructure delivery. We want to make sure those things are in lockstep with each other, and also restrict development in areas with natural hazards, or set up the right process for this development to go through to ensure that those hazards are being adequately managed. Additional study, again, the OPA contents being coordinated with servicing study, and through the implementation program, an area servicing plan will be undertaken, as well as a Midtown stormwater management plan. In terms of related processes, again, pointing to the regional integrated master plan, which guides the management and development of the region's water and wastewater systems. So these processes will be integrated with each other. And again, through development applications, this is where applicants will require functional servicing reports. For instance, developers will create some local infrastructure themselves, and the town will collect development charges, including those for servicing infrastructure. So finally, financing. This is a frequent refrain that we've been asked: how will this all be paid for? And to be very direct, cost and financing is not directly addressed within an official plan amendment. The Midtown Oakville implementation program, however, does include financial studies. What the OPA can do is include, and what we know it will do, is it will include directions that result in a need for new infrastructure or for land acquisition to realize the vision for Midtown. And those do come with a cost. And understanding those costs is part of what the Midtown implementation program will look into. And we have included a Midtown funding and financing strategy, which will identify the cost of municipal infrastructure and the various tools and financing strategies available to achieve that infrastructure. So related to this are the development charges bylaw. So as we've established, development charges are a charge that developers are to pay that relates to delivering infrastructure. And also through development applications itself is where those the extraction of those funds actually happens. So I thank you for your extended attention on all of those matters, but I hope that it's been helpful to establish the connections between what the OPA is doing and how it connects to other elements of the Midtown implementation program. And Jeff will close us out with a couple of comments about next steps.
Thanks, Lee. So in terms of next step, I'm just going to walk through some of our upcoming engagements as we get through this official plan amendment process. We'll be coming back to council on January 30th for Committee of the Whole number 6. That's when and I'll share a little more detail about what that will entail. But we'll be coming back to share some of our preferred concept and some preliminary, some draft directions for the OPA. As part of that, then following that session, we're now planning for the next round of engagement with the public and stakeholders. So, very shortly after that Committee of the Whole session, we'll then be looking to meet with our Technical Advisory Committee again, with our development community. We'll have one, because that's a bit more detailed, and we'll be sharing very specific demonstration of the land use. We will be having one-on-one conversations with some of those stakeholders, and as well, we'll be hosting another round of Public Information Center, the third one in our process. Following that, we'll then be moving into phase 4 of our work, where we'll be taking some of the feedback we've gathered in phase 3, making refinements, and then posting a draft copy of the official plan amendment. We'll then come to council for a statutory meeting to review that draft official plan amendment, followed by further refinements and a final meeting for approval. So as I mentioned, we'll be producing a what we've heard report in relation to the consultation that we've just had. So that'll document a lot of the inputs that are going to go into our preferred land use concept. And so we'll share that on our website and with you on our next Committee of the Whole session. But just to clarify, the preferred land use concept will really be an amalgamation of those 3 concepts we've seen based on feedback that we've gathered from members of the public, from stakeholders, from council yourselves, and from town staff. We'll be also sharing a 3D demonstration of what buildings may look like based on that land use concept. The town is not the developer, but these land use concepts, we do show what they could entail. And then we'll be sharing some policy directions that align to that concept and align with the feedback that we received, that you'll then, once we share the actual official plan amendment, you'll see reflected in that. So we'll take, once we share that, we'll take further refinements with that third round of consultation, and we'll be producing a final, or not final, but a draft official plan amendment document. And with that, so we're now in, as I mentioned before, we're now in phase 3, and we'll be moving into, as we move into January, we'll be closing out phase 3, getting feedback, and starting to write the official plan amendment and moving into phase 4. And just to reiterate or highlight that that's not the end of our work. We do continue on with the Midtown Implementation Program. We have a functional design piece that has now included some of the technical studies that Lee has mentioned or talked about, which include a transportation plan, stormwater plan, area servicing plan. There's a functional servicing report that combines those two elements that I just mentioned, as well as that Designing Midtown document, a public realm plan, the roadway functional design, a utilities plan, and capital cost estimates for all of the above. And then as we get into the phasing and implementation, phase 6 of our work, we'll then be looking at how to implement some of those through a municipal land acquisition and disposal strategy, our school strategy, the economic development strategy, zoning bylaws, phasing strategy, how everything kind of pieces together over the coming years. And then the final piece of our work will be the funding and financing component, where we'll be, taking those capital cost estimates and the phasing component to look at how things will be funded through the coming years throughout the development process. And phase 8 will be beyond the scope of our work, but the town's in a continuous process to develop out Midtown in the coming years. So thank you for your time, and that is the end of our presentation for tonight.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, do you want to ask questions now, or would you rather wait and have our delegations first? Okay. Madam Clerk, would you call our first delegation, please?
Madam Chair, the first delegation is Alicia Bedford with Oakville Community Association.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You have 10 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, Midtown Committee as a whole. The first slide, please. My name is Alicia Bedford, and Oakville Community Association's vision is that it wants to contribute to creating an engaged, safe, caring, and vibrant community where all residents enjoy a positive quality of life here in Oakville. Second slide, please. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Oakville Community Association, OCA, and I'm here this evening to provide some comments about the Midtown development area to the committee as a whole. Slide 3, please. In previous presentations, OCA has mentioned a number of issues related to Midtown, including increased traffic congestion, high density, the unknown cost of the infrastructure. The land in question is bad, with many deficiencies to overcome. Schools have not even been addressed. What about medical care, developer finances, bankruptcies, and negative impacts on the Oakville-Clarkson airshed, which has been brought up in the last presentation? Slide 4, please. Midtown has a variety of financial-related issues that need to be explored. The infrastructure costs, for one, with over $280 million for roads. Next, oh, no, not yet. Thank you. No number has been given, not even an estimate for the roads. This is concerning. We would like to know what safeguards are in place if developers are not able to complete projects. Lastly, have developers purchased the land in which they want to develop, or is this by a letter of intent? If it's by a letter of intent, we feel this should be made available to the public. Slide 5, please. The public meetings were very restrictive, and residents were not allowed to discuss the important issues such as building height and density. The sessions were controlling, including the restricting of questions from the residents for only half an hour. Community input is being managed with no clear concern by the consulting group. over here. Residents are somewhat being muzzled. Slide 6, please. The 3 alternative plans are simply theoretical in nature, and are being presented prematurely. The infrastructure costs should be considered first, and the majority of infrastructure should be built before to minimize traffic chaos in Oakville, unless, of course, you don't care about that, which seems pretty clear to all Oakville residents. The recent decline in condo sales must be considered due to the changing market. Some of the land is technically not available and should not be incorporated into the plans, such as lands owned by Metrolinx. Slide 7, please. The 3 alternatives would meet the definition of field of dreams. But this is risky to think just because it is built that people will come. Slide 8, please. The Midtown lands are not suitable for development for a number of reasons, including the location of the Ford plant, the close proximity to the QEW, Trafalgar Road, and the train tracks. Next slide, please. Halton Region Council passed the Regional Official Plan Amendment, which was then approved by the province in 2022, which was at a time all of Oakville residents were distracted by the pandemic. How convenient was that? The Regional Official Plan Amendment, called ROPA 49, identified major transit station areas, which included Midtown. The definition of major transit station areas is an area that is within a 500 to 800 meter radius of a major transit station, and the areas can be reached within a 10-minute walk. Slide 10, please. This slide up here depicts an approximate 800-meter radius of the Oakville GO station, and it is obvious that the certain lands in the east part of Midtown do not fit with the major transit station areas definition. OCA measured the radius. We actually measured it. And it is 800 meters from the exit of the Oakville GO train parking garage on Cornwall Road to Watson Avenue, and it was 1,400 meters to Chartwell Road, which is over by 600 meters. That cannot be overlooked. Slide 11, please. There's a recent tribunal, OLT, decision in Eden Shaw Elizabeth Developments Limited versus the City of Mississauga. This tribunal, this application that was before the tribunal was to construct a 24-story residential building comprised of an 18-story tower atop a 6-story podium, 3 one-story townhouses, and an underground parking garage near the Port Credit GO station. The main question to be determined by the tribunal was if the application wanted to optimize or maximize the site. The tribunal determined that the proposal sought to maximize as opposed to optimizing the site. Slide 12, please. The difference between optimizing and maximizing is clear in that maximizing is to build as large as possible with the developer seeking maximum revenues, whereas optimizing would represent the best community solution. Maximizing anything means achieving the highest possible value, and optimizing anything means achieving some other goal that is not necessarily the maximum value. Slide 13, please. The tribunal rejected the application and the appeal was dismissed, citing that there are other important factors which must be considered. It was found that the proposed development was too ambitious for the subject property. Midtown is ambitious too, and OCA would argue that other important factors are not being considered as referenced earlier. In addition, the known 4 proposed towers of 58 or more stories in the Midtown development area would fit the definition of maximization based on this tribunal decision, not considering Oakville residents whatsoever. Slide 14, please. OCA believes that the town should meet with the province and the region of Halton to determine how best it develops a future urban growth strategy which does not destroy the nature and character of the town of Oakville over the next 30 years. Alternative land parcels could be identified to meet the future requirements of the Place to Grow Act. Finally, we confirm that OCA wants to work with council and the town's planning department with the assistance of the province to develop a midtown which all Oakville residents can be proud. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, committee as a whole, for listening tonight. Thank you. And Merry Christmas to you and yours. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, seeing no questions, we'll move to our second delegation. I believe it'll be virtual.
Yes, Madam Chair. Pamela Knight with Coronation Park Residents Association.
Good evening.
Welcome, Ms. Knight. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Dedek. Good evening to you and your committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to engage with you this evening. We don't have a visual presentation tonight. Instead, I will offer some comments which focus on 3 areas. The first being density. At the meeting held with the RAs some months back, we underscored the need to receive information on what the optimal density would be to allow intensification, but deliver livability in an area of 42 hectares. We think that's a number that should be driving our designs for Midtown. Unfortunately, no one has ever provided the answer. Our first objective is to reach the previously mandated figure of 200 people and jobs per hectare. After that, what can we accommodate over the coming years? Let's remember we're not at a loss in other areas in Oakville to handle some proportionate growth. Census figures from 2021 show us some interesting facts. For instance, the current average level of density in Oakville is 1,538 people per square kilometer. In comparison, Burlington is at 1,004, Hamilton's census division is 509, and Milton is 365. If we take the gross area of Midtown and treat it as just over 1 square kilometer, the projected population to satisfy the 200 people and jobs requirement results in a resident population of 13,900 people per square kilometer. To put that in perspective, the density of Toronto's census division is 4,427, and it actually ranks higher than Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. To look at it another way, with an area of just 2 square kilometers, Monaco is the most densely populated country in the world, with a population density of over 19,000 people per square kilometer. The tallest building is 49 stories. Its other 9 high rises range from 26 to 37 stories. There are 7 schools, community centers, 4 churches, 13 parks and gardens, 10 museums, 5 theaters, and so on. We're now being told to plan for Midtown with approximately 32,500 people per square kilometer, placing it on the same level as city districts in places such as Buenos Aires, Ho Chi Minh City, Paris, Hong Kong, and Nairobi. Again, what is the density that will bring us the highest level of livability while delivering adequate, achievable density within a developable area that's about 1/2 square kilometer in size? Moving on to my next area, concepts. In creating concepts, why are we not offering possible scenarios that reflect the private ownership of various pieces of land around the area and projecting what those owners would possibly intend to develop? For instance, purely residential, purely commercial, or a mix thereof. And what opportunities exist for lands in the ownership of others, such as the town, the region, utilities, etc., for uses such as parks, cultural, and other needs? Have we had those conversations with landowners? If so, how are they reflected in what we're seeing? If not, why not? Those of us who are residents of Oakville who circulate through the area that will be Midtown and the areas surrounding it, look at these concepts and see things such as the fact that the areas along Old Mill and Cornwall are set adrift from the northern sector due to poor connectivity. And while little parks and tunnels are shown as possibilities, they aren't realistic. Likewise, creating a cross-avenue thoroughfare that's multiple lanes wide does nothing to create a livable, inviting downtown vibe. Downtown areas are supposed to slow traffic, encourage shopping and strolling. And in this area of increased density, our green spaces and parks are supposed to be safe and easy places to access, whether it be with children, pets, elders, or simply a place to run or cycle. Crossing 4 to 6 lanes of traffic just doesn't measure up. The last area I want to key on is planning tools. All of these considerations seem to be things we continue to circle but never resolve, as we need to consider the presence and participation of residents, developers, and government. Why have we not made Midtown the focus of a community planning permit system? It would force us all to come to the table and openly work together for a common solution. As well, it would provide us with the tools we require to create livability, the inclusion of affordable housing and elements of sustainability, such as requirements for solar power, rainwater capture and reuse, energy efficiency, green space connections, and much more. And lastly, a successful CPPS exercise would create a clearly worded and agreed upon official plan amendment for final consideration. Thank you. That concludes my remarks, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you. You do have one question from Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, Ms. Knight, for coming out and once again sharing the great research that you do. So I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So the calculation for density in Midtown, what was that final number you came up with?
Based on a square kilometer, the initial mandated situation of 20,200 people per hectare, mixed jobs and people, would result in 13,900 people per square kilometer. Now we're talking about higher numbers, and it's suggested that we could be looking at 32,500 people. So that would be the same, 32,500 per square kilometer. Because we're dealing with about 1 square kilometer.
So we have 1 square kilometer, and we are going to have far greater than 200 people in jobs per hectare based on the concepts that were introduced. Do I have that correct?
I'm basing my information on the fact that we're now being told that we're looking at 32,500 people in what we're planning for Midtown. That does indeed suggest to me that we're well past that 13,200 number.
So thank you very much, and thank you for reminding the committee and the public that the request was always to find out what is the optimal density with the highest level of livability, not just to produce
Correct.
a concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, we'll go to our next delegation.
The next delegation is Carolyn McMinn with Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to put my glasses on because despite printing in a larger font, I still can't read it. The TCRH, Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, has conscientiously assisted the Committee of the Whole's work in amending our official plan as it applies to Midtown Oakville. We embarked on this journey collectively and with the best of intentions. The TCRH directors have attended or provided input to every Midtown OPA public meeting. We are living in a time where our continued security and prosperity and the livability we have come to enjoy in our town will depend on cooperation between all levels of our populace, which obviously includes all levels of government. The fundamental reason for reviewing and amending the Midtown Official Plan is not just to comply with current provincial legislation, but it is to give the town of Oakville a say in the direction the development takes here in the future. We need the tools and policies in place to both embrace and push back on developments as is appropriate. Because yes, we do need development there. So we know this, and it is with great regret that I tell you now that we are very disappointed with the results of our work so far. We had expected a draft amendment which we could understand and which we could support by this point in time. We feel we are far from this place. At the outset of this ambitious undertaking, this formation of the Committee of the Whole, we were told that there would be 9 points addressed during this process, and there are some glaring deficiencies that I will highlight below. We would like to see action taken towards these goals by the next Committee of the Whole meeting. In the first place was the public consultation. The public engagement, we feel, has been superficial at best, which has not materially influenced any emerging amendments. Of the 220,000 residents of Oakville, there have only been a few hundred in total participate in any of the opportunities for input. So if I was to say there might have been 500 people in total, of which I've been to 5 or 6, so you could count me 5 or 6 times, it's less than 0.2% of the population of Oakville have actually participated in this public engagement. Now, I know it is difficult to get people to engage, but that's something that I find quite troubling. The best practices and lessons learned have not, in terms of planning practices, have not been brought to Midtown. Vaughan springs to mind as an area where development has not followed best planning practices and indeed should serve as a warning of what not to do. We have expected that lessons learned from other developments would be shared and risks mitigated in Midtown. And what we are seeing are idealised visions which may or may not be suitable for this plot of land. I emailed this to everyone here present tonight so you can read all the other detail for yourself. I just thought I'd highlight 3 or 4 salient points. A major thing that troubles us is the understanding of the required infrastructure timing and the province and Metrolinx and other stakeholder commitment to achieving this. The complete lack of engagement in these proceedings by Metrolinx, which is the owner of a large part of Midtown, also including the land where the realignment of Cross Avenue is supposed to be located, is quite significant and will actually really impact on the ability of us to get Midtown developed in a way that makes sense. There are also several other reasons why we're frustrated. And one is well beyond our control. The Ontario government's arbitrary overriding of local and regional plans throughout the GTHA since the start of the 43rd Parliament in June 2022, compounded by our anxieties about this government's probity. Recent policy reversals for the Greenbelt land swap and the subsequent RCMP investigation of the same, the dissolution of the Peel region, or not, depending which day of the week it is and which newspaper you read. Combined with there was a recent in-depth review of the way the local land use plans were rewritten by the province to meet developers' requests, including cutting and pasting verbatim into the regional plans for these requests, and clearly that's of great concern. Those plans included the Halton Regional Plan, which the province decided to change because they didn't like what was written there. That's one reason for being frustrated. Another reason is that the three idealised concepts presented by the consultants failed to take into account the developments that are either currently approved or those under review, including those that might be at the OLT. The fact that 51% of the 117 attendees, which equates to 60 people, or possibly less because apparently only 96 voted, at the recent public engagement sessions, they voted for concept A. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best concept. Maybe it's the least worst, or maybe it's the only one they understood properly. So I think there's some work to do there, and I am actually pleased to hear that the consultants will be actually taking feedback and hopefully coming up with, one really good plan. We're also very concerned about the ability to collect development charges, and there were numerous statements tonight in the presentation on how the town can use this money for parks and community benefits. What is the projected cost of the infrastructure that's not going to be covered by development charges and the parkland dedication and community benefits laws? And just to highlight that under Bill 23, the amount of housing units was doubled before the developer actually has to make a payment in lieu of parkland. And I'm not sure everyone here understands that. So previously, if they were allowed to build 100 units before they actually had to kick in for parkland, now it's 200 units. We're also almost out of time to have the OPA in place in time for the hearings on the development proposals currently appealed to the OLT. We fear now that whatever amended plan we develop will be overtaken by events or overridden by exogenous influences such as the provincial government or the OLT. Developers rarely abide by bylaws that are in place, and nor can the town use tools such as limiting building heights to determine what can be built where. Floor space index is a very blunt tool and is easily manipulated by developers as well. We also still have many questions relating to the scale, the density, the built form and housing mix, parks, public realm, traffic, active transportation, sustainability, schools and metro links that have not been addressed despite repeatedly asking for this. It seems like some of these master plans have been delayed and we will now be seeking approval of the OPA before these are completed, and that is quite worrying. We're worried that and can't understand the inability to get answers to straightforward questions. We would also like to see at least 2 3-dimensional models of what the Midtown build-out will look like by 2031 and 2051, with varying populations and built forms. There is a little point going much beyond that, is there are too many external factors that can and will change what Midtown will look like. Many thanks for your attention this evening.
Thank you very much. You have a question from Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming out. I appreciated receiving your email earlier. You talked about the one concept that will come back to council, and is it that you're looking for a second concept or the time difference, 2031 and 2051? Just confused on that.
Okay, I'm sure that there is the ability to, with computer programs, whatever these days, you could probably do half a dozen concepts of each. I'd like to see 2 different concepts, one for 2031 and one for 2051, with things like addressing floor space in the FSI, so FSI 4 along the Cornwall Road corridor, for example. If you're coming from South Oakville, that's still going to hit you like a wall because, it's a maximum of 25 stories. What if you could create 2 different concepts, one where you step it up gradually and one where they, because developers generally go for the maximum, not necessarily the optimized, but they do go for the maximum. So if you could, have 2 or 3 different built form concepts that would show us what each one would look like.
Thank you. You answered my next question in terms of, was there anything in particular that you found egregious in terms of the plan? And it's the Cornwall Road 25-story drop-off?
Yeah, that's not transition. We were told it was going to be a transition from the current neighbourhoods and then transition up, being hit with a wall of potentially 25-story buildings. Doesn't seem like transition.
In your view, it'd be better off as, you mentioned housing mix in your note, whether
so what's really interesting is that people, when they put their Midtown lens on, they think of housing mix simply as condominiums with different size units in it. So 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, studio apartments, whatever you want to call them. We'd like to see maybe some low-rise, some mid-rise, and some high-rise That's more of a housing mix than, than bedroom size or square footage.
Good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our final delegation, I believe, is Harry Shea.
Yes, Harry Shea with the Bryan Village Residents Association.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor Burton, and members of Town Council. My first comment regards community planning permit bylaw. In tonight's presentation, it was identified in a light blue box because it is available but not currently used in Oakville. And I ask, why not? If it's an effective planning tool, can we declare it will be used in Midtown and throughout Oakville? Second, regarding density, how can Midtown density be phased as Midtown is being developed? How would the OPA or our planning tools address a phased approach? Because if livability and getting it right is the overall objective, then it stands to reason a more pragmatic or incremental approach might be justified. And finally, how much does land currently cost in Midtown? I ask this question for two reasons. One, how are we going to achieve our objectives through the OPA if the OPA does not address financing? And two, although the photo of Emery Barnes Park in Vancouver is impressive, I think it's misleading to constantly show it unless we're planning to have a green space park that is that large in Midtown. And if we are, how much would that park cost today? And how are we going to pay for it? I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Do we have any questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. And I believe we have one more delegation, Madam Clerk, Ms. Terry Ball from, welcome, Terry.
Good evening. I'm from Joshua Creek Residents Association, JCRA, and JCRA directors have been discussing at length over the last few years all of the developments as they came to light about Midtown. We've had the same concerns. A lot of what I have to say is going to sound rather repetitive, especially after hearing the residents associations that spoke before me. There are some small differences, but all of us in Oakville, I believe, share the same concerns, particularly about density and about the general format for planning. I appreciate the efforts that you've made coming together with the Committee of the Whole, hearing us that we wanted to have a master plan first that would put into place what all of you and all of us residents thought was best practice for planning a huge community such as this. The problems are so great though, and I know that you share the same concerns that all of us do, that the province overrides so much of what we say, that the concepts that we have looked at and pored over and, thought so much about, they're really just ideas, they're just concepts. We all hope that some of those things will come to fruition, but we still have some concerns. One of the concerns that we have is about the employment numbers, and maybe this is more of a question. We see these employment numbers. First of all, the first numbers are something around 16,000 at 2051. We wonder how those numbers have come to be. Does the province propose to remove retail and office as employment definitions from the Planning Act? This is something that we've been hearing about. Does that 16,000 number in that proposal include warehousing jobs, manufacturing jobs, retail, or is there any idea at all about what those jobs might entail? It is a possibility, we understand, that it's up to the developers who own the land what they will put there, that it might again just be a concept that we have. The infrastructure costs are a concern for us, and I know planning discussed some of that, and that will be looked at in more detail in phases 5 through 7. So we look forward to hearing more about that. I'm sure that it will be of some satisfaction to all of you, because it'll be a concern for you as well as you set your budgets each year. These are big concerns for us as well as taxpayers. The parks and green space, that's been mentioned over and over again. We still have some confusion about how the parks can be affected. They look great on paper. There were, in Concept Day, for example, there were some good sizable chunks of land. How can this actually come to be? How much of the green space is what we have learned is called sliver parks? And some of us are wondering what the difference is between a community park and a public park. There are still some questions about those ideas about green space. This one is about the SPAs that have already been submitted. Can you clarify for us how many people, if these SPAs are approved, and it looks possible that they will be, how many people those buildings would accommodate? I know that has got to do with FSI, and there are some of those things you don't know. You don't know what the configuration would be that the developers have in store, but there must be a range. I think we've talked about this before. We would all like to know what the range is. What's the smallest number of people that could be accommodated in those buildings that already have been submitted to us, that we know are on the books, that are probably coming, that are really tall towers? How many people could be coming in that first chunk? Those are pretty well all the questions I have, and I thank you so much for the opportunity. We really have appreciated the fact that we were invited numerous times to speak, to participate, to hear from planning, to hear from the design folks. It has been very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want, maybe we can get an answer for you regarding the numbers of the current ones that are in the queue, so to speak. Commissioner Garvey, do you happen to know what the approximate range is for the population of those buildings?
Madam Chair, maybe Mr. Charles has it. I don't have that off the top of my head, but
through you, Madam Chair, sorry to disappoint. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head either. However, we would certainly be able to bring that back through their tracker that we've been providing on the staff reports, and we can detail based on the various applications that we have in, because they do have the number of bedrooms or the number of units associated with that, so we can do that conversion for a committee.
Thank you very much. I think it's a valid concern given what we're projecting. Thank you very much for coming and delegating. Do I have any other? Oh, sorry, Councillor Haslett-Deal. Sorry, if you want to just come back.
Terry, I was just going to thank you, and I just wanted to just ask on your behalf a question to the staff, because you were talking about employment, and you were asking questions about employment numbers and employment definition. So, Commissioner, could you just clarify for us, where did the employment numbers come from, and what would be defined as an employment or a job given the changes that are happening with the province?
through you, Madam Chair, I'll answer the first question. If I can refer you to the August 15th report of council, where it shows the broad number of jobs across and within each development area. So the province assigns through the region an employment number over the course of the horizon, and there's an exercise to apportion those across the whole municipality. So that you can see from that August 15th report just where the employment sits. In terms of the definition of job in this area, it would be office-type jobs that would be the focus. Lee, is that office and retail would be the primary focus of the jobs in this area.
So I think we did understand that the province was, generally speaking, mandating those numbers, but how does that come into effect? Do you have the power to mandate that when developers come? They own a piece of land, they say they want to put up a tower, and you say, well, that's supposed to have employment, some type of employment within that building. How can you help us? Is that what happens?
Yeah, in short answer, that's basically how it happens.
Okay.
So we're establishing the land uses through the official plan amendment, which highlights purely employment areas, mixed use areas, and as development applications come forward, we have those discussions about what the ambitions of the developer is. They tell us what the market is. We try to influence that in terms of amount of retail, amount of office space, location. Sometimes they would come forward with a large tenant, as happened in, say, Vaughan, where RBC was the tenant or KPMG was the tenant. So we have the numbers are forecasts, and they're based on the provincial regulations of what we need to account for, and then it's the art of influence for the balance.
That makes sense. Thanks
I
very
will
much.
say, Madam Chair, too, employment is the hardest thing actually to forecast because it is so subject to the availability of land and the locational attributes of specific users.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just going to canvass. Yes, do you want to come forward? And I see you as well in the far right there.
Hello, volume good? Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and I was here a couple weeks ago talking about biking. I just want to support the idea of the community planning permit system. I've heard it brought up a couple times tonight. And honestly, it's such a good solution for sort of adjusting our zoning process to support quicker development, bringing the input from the community up first, getting that out, and then that allows us to basically set the rules for what we want development to be. And it does a much better job, I think, than our current system at enforcing the things that we want to keep. And the community planning permit system is already used in many other areas in Ontario, so I think it would fit right here in Oakville. And so I just wanted to support that. The second thing is I just wanted to know, I've heard lots of comments about the cost of infrastructure for Midtown. One of the things that was discussed a little while ago was about the Housing Accelerator Fund. I know that was a couple months back, but I was just kind of wondering if we could get, or if I could get like an answer on where we are at with that, because that's quite a bit of money that we could use specifically for Midtown, because that would help us with infrastructure. And then the last thing I want to do is I wanted to comment just on the sort of the current consulting period, just based on like for the residents. I went to the one at the Trafalgar Community Center, and personally I thought it was great. I didn't feel muzzled or anything like that. I felt like it was very well communicated, and the consultants were there to answer all questions. So I didn't feel like I was being shoehorned or like my questions were being forced in any way. I liked concept A, not because I was confused or because I didn't know what was happening. I liked it because I want density in Midtown. As a young person, that's what we want. And I want a place to live that's affordable. So that's why I chose concept A. And there's also just a couple things from other delegates I just need to correct. FSI was already provided in some of the presentations before. As well, sliver parks were not accounted when calculating the total green space. I believe that was the case back then, so that is not true. And the last thing is I understand that there's some concern from residents associations about the transition from 25 stories down to the current basically 1-story or 2-story area in the neighborhood. And I don't really know what to say to that because, well, all the density is being pushed into Midtown because they don't want it. So if we want lower story heights in Midtown, those neighborhoods should support a bit more density in those areas to allow for a smoother transition up to Midtown, at least in what they're forecasting. But I don't really see a way for us to hit our housing targets while, adding like a 5-story building all over Midtown. So I think it's got to be density somewhere. Right now it's all in Midtown, and I think I support maybe stretching that out across other neighborhoods, but it's going to require a bit of flexibility from some of the other associations. So yeah, just to reiterate, the community planning permit system, support that. A little bit of transparency just on the Housing Accelerator Fund, where we are currently at with that. And I thought that the consulting has been really great so far. I plan on going to the future sessions. So yeah, I just want to thank you. And thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Elgar, just so you, regarding the Accelerator Fund, there was that topic raised recently that there was considerable discussion, and I understand from the clerk, January 23rd, there'll be a special council meeting as an update for that. So just so that you're aware of that coming up. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Question, you talked about you want affordable housing. What is affordable housing for you?
Well, right now, I think for me, affordable housing, I'm just going to kind of go with the sort of common definition. There isn't a agreed upon federal definition right now.
What is it? Like, what is the agreed upon?
There isn't one.
No,
I think there's a current legal dispute between developers and the federal government, I think, on that. So I'm just going to let them handle that. But for me, I think a housing affordability, I think a great place to look at that would be, what is a housing affordability problem, which it does have a definition, which is if you're spending more than 15% of your income on where you live. And so for me, when I was living in Nova Scotia, I was spending about 60% of my income on where I lived. So I would be considered having a housing affordability problem. But ideally, we bring that down to, I think, around 15%, because that allows people to save, ideally buy a place as well, sort of get into the market. I mean, that's what I would consider it, but that's just my opinion.
It used to be 30%, and now I think what they're proposing is something quite different. It's 80% of the average value of a house in the area.
I think it's probably going to end up being closer to what the market is in that area. I mean, we can't obviously necessarily determine specifically like what a house will be priced in different areas. I mean, Oakville is a place where lots of people want to live, so I mean, it's just demand. But to me, it's 15%, but certainly less than what it is now. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, yes and no. It is 30. It used to be 30%, never 15 of household income, but now it looks like it's not be so little. You'd be shocked. Right currently. Right now, because of the provincial downloading, in 2024, $31.2 million is because we're subsidizing this type of stuff going forward between healthcare and development charges.
Yeah, I mean, the price of housing is quite expensive, and probably the best way to do that would be to address the supply issue by densifying to bring that cost of housing down.
Well, we'll see, because I don't think the developers right now, from what I'm reading, are building much. They're not selling much.
That's why I support the community planning permit system, because you can enforce affordable housing through your official plan amendment and ensure that there is affordable housing being built as a pre-approved thing for the developers. It gets the shovel in the ground quicker, and there's less dispute about how much affordable housing is going in. It's already set in that bylaw. So that's why I support it. But yeah, because I care a lot about affordable housing as well. So
I thank you.
Councillor Theo.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your ongoing engagement. And thank you for referencing the community permit planning process. I do have one concern. You said you chose concept A because it was more affordable and there was more density.
I chose concept A because I, as a young person, want more urban areas. And I mean, I like the way it was organized compared to B or C. I think all the concepts are really great, but A, I think, was overwhelmingly popular just because I think it was very clear what was being built, I guess, from that plan. But if I said affordability, I didn't I must have misspoke only because I know it doesn't, those concepts don't have anything to do with the density or, sorry, not density, the type of housing being built, but yeah.
So, okay, good. I just didn't want you to walk away and had this perception that one has more affordable than the other, because as the earlier presentation talked about, if we put inclusionary zoning in, there'll be elements of affordability that would be there. But none of the concepts varied in that. And none of them were more dense than others, though there was density, higher density in certain areas versus in other. So it does call out that there are misconceptions that came out of some of that conversation. And I would like to just reference that everybody has a perspective about density and about how we grow. I have not heard from residents associations that they don't want to grow and they don't want to ensure that we have housing along that corridor, or that corridor needs to grow. What they've asked for is responsible growth that will ensure that when you choose to live there, it is truly livable. Thank you.
I totally agree. I appreciate that. Obviously, I want to collaborate with as many people as we can on this process. I mean, my goal at the end of the day is just to be able to buy an affordable home, ideally in Oakville, but yeah, I think some density for everybody would probably help quite a bit with that. So that's all I wanted to reiterate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, if you would like to come forward, and then, no, I've got the gentleman in the back here first. Yes, come on up. Yes. And then the gentleman on the aisle there. Thank you for coming, and you have 10 minutes.
Let's see how we could do it.
Get your name for the record, please.
Sure. Okay, thank you for the opportunity once again. My name is Terry Branch. I'm a resident of Oakville. And I'm going to take a different spin on this. I'm going to talk about my observations, and then I'm going to end up with recommendations. So based on my observations, first, at the November 14th town hall meeting, on November 14th, and then November 24th, midterm workshop held at Sheridan College. I would like to offer some comments at both events. Now, what I noticed at both events, the engineering consortium presented their three concepts for Midtown. Unfortunately, despite concerns raised by councillors and delegates during the November 14th meeting, the engineering consortium did not make any adjustments to their presentation at the Sheridan workshop. Additionally, they failed to inform attendees about the concerns raised by councillors and delegates at the November 14th session. This lack of concern, concerns raised by councillors and delegates. Now, the lack of concerns, lack of communication was very concerning to me. I provided feedback to council regarding both November 14th meeting and November 24th. Now, I am curious to know if my feedback was addressed by the engineering consortium and by the town planning, and if so, what was the outcome? Now, I would like to just take the opportunity right now to present the key concerns that were raised in November 14th. Councillor North had reservations about retail aspects at Midtown based on his experience with Uptown. Lee McGrath refusal to make changes in the presentation despite feedback. She stated clearly to Councillor Elgar that there will be no changes to the presentation, despite serious concerns presented. Financial risk associated with the concepts highlighted by Rick Sandel. Concerns about carbon emissions raised by Alicia Bedford from the Oakville Community Association. Concerns about the population growth and potential gaps in services and parks expressed by George Niblock from the Oakville Lakeside Resident Association. Councillor Elgar questioned whether the master plan was considered. It appears that it wasn't. Concerns about planned Trafalgar East side ramp raised by Councillor Adams. Lack of consideration of the affordable housing at inclusionary zoning mentioned by Councillor Adams. Jeff Chow of the consortium told Councillor Adams that none of these concepts presented included least expensive or more expensive affordable homes, contradicting Lee McGrath's suggestion that the municipality needs a framework for inclusionary zoning. Lack of criteria evaluation, the concepts questioned by Councillor Longo. Insufficient study of retail sector highlighted by Councillor Knoll. Inadequate inclusion of names of things in the 3 midterm concepts. And then the need for clarification that the concepts are aspirational, as suggested by Councillor Janet. The traffic congestion concern on Trafalgar QEW ramps by Councillor Adams. Now, the concerns now raised at November 14th meeting were not taken into account when the presentation was made to the public at the college workshop, at Sheridan College workshop. Furthermore, the attendees were not made aware of all these concerns that I just spoke about. This was particularly concerning because, as pointed out by Jeff Chow, the consortium is, in a previous meeting which I attended, he stated that the consortium is retained by the town. Based on my observations from attending November 24th workshop at Sheridan College, I would like to just express my key concerns. I attended the workshop after receiving a flyer that invited me to a meeting with the impression that the meeting was organized by concerned residents. To my surprise, it turned out to be a controlled workshop with the same presentation given in the engineering consortium, by the engineering consortium on November 14th. So it was unclear who initiated the letter, as neither the commissioner of planning, Mr. Garb, nor others on the council were aware of this flyer. I found the workshop to be highly controlling, and I was disappointed that Mark from the consortium did not share the concerns discussed during the November 14th meeting with the attendees. I brought up these observations to both the council and the planning commissioner. My main question is regarding the steps taken by the planning department and the consortium to address all these concerns. Now, based on my observation at the workshop, I have some concerns that I would just like to address. One, lack of acknowledgement of the concerns raised by councillors and delegates, indicating consortium lack of interest in addressing concerns by councillors and delegates. And to me, this is very serious. Feeling manipulated during the public meeting workshop. Concept selection process being limited and not representative of the entire population. When I was there, it's only 40 people, and I'm not sure what happened in the next 2 workshops, how many people there. I think that we should know how many people are really attending these workshops. There's a disconnect between the concepts and the livable Oakville plan. Over intensification and disregard for other considerations like transit infrastructure, traffic congestion, carbon emission, and community impact. And then there's a need for balanced planning to avoid overcrowding, strained infrastructure, limited access to green spaces, and decreased community cohesion. Finally, my comments on the three concepts. Absence of defining a place, essential for the development of a 15-minute city. Insufficient land use mix, diversity in concept A and concept C. Lack of consideration for office and educational focus in concept B. Inadequate retail distribution across the three concepts. Retail focus along August Davis and Cross Avenue without proper connection to the neighborhood precincts. No clear definition of multiple civic spaces for either locations. Unfortunately, the three concepts, though aspirational, cannot adequately serve as a guiding principle for the council to direct the efforts and actions. This is because they lack the necessary, pertinent, and concrete information required to base decisions regarding the official plan amendment. As a result, it is challenging to translate these aspirations into actuality. How could you? The consortium failure to take into account Mayor Burton's statement in his October 13 letter to Minister Calandra is equally perplexing. In his letter, Mayor Burton emphasized the crucial need for Ontario government to make use of surplus provincial land for the construction of affordable housing and to foster.
You've used your 10 minutes. Could you just wind up,
Okay,
please?
let me just wind up here.
Thank
Recommendations. Okay, the engineering consortium must address the concerns raised by councillors and delegates, refine the plan to address gaps and inconsistencies, align with the livable Oakville plan, and incorporate valuable input to developing a comprehensive and well-thought plan in Midtown, and the consortium must understand that it is their responsibility to ensure accountability in presenting concepts that address and identify issues while also prioritizing the long-term livability and sustainability of Oakville, and create a committee to regularly review the consortium activities, identify issues, and ensure value for the town committee to issue reports monthly or quarterly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wonder if I can just assist, and maybe I'll ask staff as well to clarify. There might have been a misunderstanding given the public information sessions that took place. It was not that we did our work on the 14th and then presented it to them on the 24th. We were providing an additional opportunity to people such as yourself to have the opportunity to participate. Not that we were going to be guiding the discussion by saying so-and-so said this or they, so it was a freedom for them to be able to express from their own point of view as to what they were seeing they have the focus to be. But Commissioner, maybe you can assist in that regard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're doing a very good job at articulating that. And as Mr. Branch and I have exchanged emails on this subject, I apologize if it wasn't as clear. I thought you fed it back to me well, that the 14th was the launch of the campaign. It was receiving council's input, just as the other three public sessions were also receiving input. That input's taken by the consortium and will be represented and reflected in the ongoing work, the concept being forward. So it wasn't intended to be council direction to the consortium to change the plans, which there really wasn't time between the 14th and 24th anyway. But to gather the input of council and then gather the input of the various groups over those 3 days, and then use that as a foundation and input into the preferred concept.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not blaming anybody or anything. The thing is what I am saying.
Sir, could you just address the council and chair rather than cross debate?
Sorry, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, what I'm saying is we all come here. You want to engage the community. You have delegates come, they present. We spend a lot of time preparing and researching. And then it seems that the consortium going like a bull in a china or full speed ahead with the what it was, I make a note while
Concepts?
No, not with the concepts, with the, with the phases, okay? They're full, like you're charging ahead with the phase. Phase 1, phase 2, we're on phase 3, we're on phase 4. Stop, they have to stop, evaluate. Phase 3, what was the value of phase 3? What was the value of phase 2? You know, you can't just charge ahead and not listen and especially when I hear comments that we are not going to make any changes. When Councillor Elgar stayed there and said that he had something, talked about the football field, okay? And it's like they're ignoring us. They're ignoring the council and they're ignoring delegates.
I'm sorry you're left with that impression. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, that's what it's yes.
Okay, but the very fact that you're expressing concern about charging forward, we have the converse where people are saying to us, you're not moving ahead. You're not doing anything but just talking and talking and talking. So you have to give some sort of framework by which to add those comments to. Hence why they gave 3 options. And as they pointed out before, you may say you like some aspects of option A, some of B, some of C. When they come back with refinements and another opportunity, and again, the public will again have another opportunity to comment as well. So we are not disregarding comments. We're tracking them very carefully, as are we the numbers of the people who attend those public information meetings. So we're not just sort of taking a ballpark figure. So I wanted to assure you that.
Well, I think what I may need then is at what point, Councillor Dudek, we're going to see all these issues that we have all brought up being cooperated. I'm not hearing no one is talking about it. We are coming here, providing our information, and at some point we have to see some action.
And those will be brought forward at a later date. At this point, we're tracking all those comments. And we're tracking them through our website, through the surveys, through the public information sessions, and those will be responded to, as planning often does when they come back to us with the report, and they identify this was expressed, this can be addressed through this mechanism or this process. So it will be done. Okay, just to give you that assurance. And we do appreciate you coming out and the amount of time yourself and others have put into the process. It's very crucial.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if you would like to come forward, please, and identify your name for the record. Thank you very much.
My name's Jim Goodfellow, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Chartwell Maple Grove Residents Association. And I'm here tonight to really to try and see what we can do to help you folks. And I've been sitting here listening to the thing, and I've come to before and I've said I got concerns about the schedule. Well, honestly, I think we kind of wasted time tonight in terms of the presentation. There's a lot of issues that they've now been put forward to the end of January. So the end of January is a really critical meeting. Like, this is a make or break thing. And so the stuff that I'd like to sort of just go through with you is just, we thought suggestions, and I hope you don't think that I'm lecturing or trying to do that kind of
Absolutely
thing.
not.
But it's sort of, here's some things for you as you get ready, thinking about January 1st. So the first thing is, I got my old project management hat on. It's December the 12th. Next week, everybody's going to be breaking off for Christmas. We're going to come back in the first week of January and going to say, now, where were we? And oh my goodness, we got the deadline at the end of January, and we have to get the material out like a week ahead of that. So we back up. All of a sudden, like, things are really compressed. So I think it's really critical, Madam Chair, for your committee here, is before you break here, really make clear your expectations to the management and to the consultants, what you expect for that meeting. Because we can't, you don't want to end up there with, the management group and the consultants with their view of what you want and your view of what you want, and we have a big expectation gap and we have no time to deal with it. So that would be the first thing, is really sort of come to grips with that, clear on the agenda and clear on your expectations. And so then we've got 6 things that we sort of identified, and they're all in that theme of, things to consider for your expectations. Okay, the first one is there is in the material, and I must admit in this, I have never seen so many studies and references to studies and plans and this kind of thing. I think you got to get really clear as what are the ones you need in order to make your decision on the OPA. What are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? And then make that clear. So that before, folks head off for Christmas break, they clearly know what is the report. There are a bunch of reports that were supposed to be coming to this meeting. Well, what are the ones you really need and focus on? Because you got no time to do all of the studies and research and everything else. And there may be, Jacobs has access to tons of research, so there may be good stuff that that you can get best practices from other sources and that kind of thing. Next thing is stakeholder feedback. You heard a lot about this tonight. I think you need to pull that together. But there's a couple of other stakeholder groups that haven't been talked about, because I think the consultants have been meeting with the developers and landowners. So you need I think a complete collection of stakeholder feedback. Now there may be confidentiality issues, but I assume you can hold in-camera meetings or you can figure out how to deal with it. But I think you need to get a total, not just the voting from the workshops piece. So that's that suggestion. Next suggestion is population estimates, density, and that kind of thing. I've got population estimate confusion. I'm confused. Maybe you guys got it all sorted out, but there's the town estimates. They come up with 30,000 people for 51. Jacobs has it for 60,000 people. There's the difference on the thing. There's a density confusion. You got to tell the consultants and your management team, got to come back and sort that out for you. Because I think that's a breadbox, sort of foundation piece for going forward. So I would make sure that there's you have a solid piece, eliminate the confusion. Another area of confusion is this whole FSI piece, and in particular with the the 3 options. It took the FSI down from 10 down to 7, and then that produced a building height of 45. Well, there must be a formula or some math or something that says, here's how you get from here to here. And so that's step number 1. Next, step number 2 is, well, back to the population. If there's this delta between 60,000 and 30,000, which is almost double, what is that? Is that excess capacity or something? So does that mean that you can actually look at the FSI of 7, bring it down lower, and would still meet all of the provincial targets? I don't know. So you need a sensitivity analysis too on the FSIs. So what is the formula? How does it, because this is all capacity, you know, and so how do you get from A to B, and then what's the sensitivity so you can understand that? And again, people should be coming to you with that, just to understand that. Got to check my clock here. Yeah. I don't want to get in your bad books. Okay. The next thing was, guess what? Cost estimates and funding. Now, surprise. Now, you've heard several people today talking about the issue of cost. You know, when I looked at the workshops and looked at the choices and the reports coming out, I still think those are like a free choice. Why wouldn't I want a park of this size or this size? You know, until you put some cost in the equation, you know, it's like your kids going shopping. Yeah, sure, you'd like to have that, but we can't afford it. So I think that's it. Then I looked at the chart that was up on the financing. Okay, and the financing said it's not. The presentation said it's not part of the OPA process. No, that happens in implementation, and it happens at the tail end of implementation. And when I looked at the box, at the tail end of implementation is December 25 or 24. That's a year from now. That's a year from now before you're going to get any kind of cost estimates as to whether you can actually afford this. So I think that's a problem for, I don't know how you approve an OPA on the basis of not having, that estimates. And I do know, by the way, that, Mr. Mayor, in your budget, there's a capital plan that floats out for 10 years and has growth. Why can't you take that framework, apply it here, and map it out, and so that you can at least understand what the exposure is and what the cost is. So, Madam Chair, let me come back to sort of the beginning. The schedule, I really think that the piece is getting clarity between, the management team, the consulting team, and yourselves as to exactly what that meeting on January is to accomplish. What is the information you need? And ensuring that your expectations are clearly stated so that they can, because that's a critical meeting. And my very last thing is, it's been a long year for you all, but commend you for your effort in this whole thing, and to wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, or whatever, and best of luck, and we look forward to a great meeting in January, and let's finish the job.
Nicely said. Jim, I believe you have a question from Councillor Giddings.
Uh-oh.
You'll be Jim.
Thanks as always for coming out, Jim. At a previous meeting, we had a bit of a question and answer in terms of retail based on based on your years in the business and my career dealing with retailers.
Right.
Just wanted to say I've appreciated the time that you've given and your expertise over a number of conversations. And just for committee's benefit, I think it wasn't my idea, Jim. I think it was you that said we're going to have to bring somebody else into this mix. But, when looking at Midtown, it has, the report talks about vibrancy and everything else. We certainly agree with that. And you were good enough to comment on a study that many of my council colleagues will remember from well over a decade ago, conducted by J.C. Williams for the downtown.
Right, and that time area. Downtown was struggling and a lot of questions, and where was it going to fit, and that all of the kind of thing. So Jacobs, I really like the slide you put in around on retail. I think they start identifying. To me, if you want to build a vibrant community in this kind of thing, retail has to be a big part of that.
So would it make sense if I had a conversation with economic development at the town, at the region, to see how we can move that forward?
Sure, I think that'd be great. Let me just give you a couple of thoughts, because you did probe me on retail. I think what the big thing is, the chart, the two slides in the deck talk about, what does vibrant mean in order to retail? How will vibrant streets, describe the character? You need a vision for retail. What is the vision for retail in Midtown? I think it could be really exciting. I think it really could do something big here. So what's the vision for retail in Midtown? And so in thinking about that, think back through, I went back and said, remember Maslow and the hierarchy of needs? Remember all that kind of thing? And the basic needs are, well, you got to deal with the basic needs. If we're going to put 30,000 people here, they got to buy groceries. They got to, you got all of that. If they're going to be here without cars, it's good. How are you going to do? So level one retail is how do you deal with the basic? The second thing in Maslow's thing was safety. Okay, so how do you do? So if once you get those, then you move upscale. That's when things could be really exciting. What kind of retail concept do you want? Can we build in Midtown? Could this be the high street? With vibrant shops, restaurants, gyms, whatever it is, kind of thing. And how do you take into account the changing world of retail, which, the pandemic has changed retail. And, people are coming back to the shops, but the multi-channel retailers are the ones that are winning. And so this has to be a multi-channel environment. So Dave, I think talk to the right kind of people, get some real people in here. This is a chance to do something out of the box.
Well, and also your comment about we better have enough parking space for Amazon vehicles and couriers.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just think.
So the roads aren't plugged.
Yeah, I mean, you got to create. If you're thinking of just creating street space for just traditional stores, you got to. This has got to be every one of these successful retailers is multi-channel. Is going to be very much that kind of environment, and the experience is so big in retail now. So what do you want to be? Do you want to be high end, middle? What it is. You got to deal with the basics, but then what are the options? And could be interesting.
It certainly will be.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Jim, Councillor Elgar's got a question for you as well.
Sir.
Yeah, a couple questions. One of them, can we get a copy of your notes?
Yes, sure.
I appreciate that. Also, you mentioned one thing that's very important, I think, is the financial side of it.
Yes.
And I know you mentioned that Mayor Burton, his budget talks like 10 years out. But the other thing is the region, like right now, the taxpayers of Halton Region are kicking in $31 million for 2024. That's what it's going to be on the tax bill of every resident in Halton Region to, it helps because of what the province is dictating what we cannot charge.
Right.
And that's, so like going forward,
right.
It doesn't sound to me like things are going to get better.
No, I don't. And, and I think in your 10-year forecast, you showed the development charges and how they level off, and you have a big warning sign about, and you've tried to put in the a caveat, you might think of, the city of Hamilton, I think in there, they put out to all their taxpayers saying, here's the tax rate, and then, here's what the government actions have cost you, and this is why the rate has to go up. We got to understand that as to what the potential exposure is. So I'm with you 100%.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim, as always. Do I have any additional delegations before I restrict it to table? Okay. I have a motion from Councillor Longo that the report entitled Midtown Program Planning Policy Tools be received for information. Any opposed? Sorry. I apologize. I didn't open for questions of council. My apologies. Councillor Haslett-Theo.
Thank you very much. So I want to just follow up on a couple questions that came up from the delegates. And I'm going to try and do that and make my way through my own as well. There was an excellent, the gentleman couldn't be here tonight, but there's an excellent submission, which I hope the consultants will read in its entirety, from Duncan Galloway. And he concurs with some of the comments that were made tonight, when he talks about the fact that he felt that the concepts presented at the workshops were disconnected from current reality. It's hard to see how any proposal based on them can become part of an OPA until they include a strategy of how key implementation issues are addressed in the outline. He goes on to talk about, really what is the objective. Maybe the objective should be to design a strategic growth area and extended areas across Oakville that can accommodate projected housing needs, jobs, and population growth, while ensuring that all areas have reasonable density, maximum space for parks and community areas, and allow for manageable transportation, traffic flow, and active and passive. And he goes on. It's an excellent delegation. I hope that it gets posted with the report from tonight. It has been submitted to the town clerk, and I'd encourage you all to look at it. So one of my questions is, I've repeatedly heard from lots of people questions about how staff arrived at the density and the concepts, considering all the constraints and the net developable area of 43 hectares. And you heard it tonight from, I believe, a couple. And at the workshops, and I was fortunate enough to make time in my schedule. I know I need to get a life. But I went, and in those workshops, people were advised that the population was to be 32,000 people and 16,000 jobs, and then ultimately 62,000 people and 19,000 jobs. And the messaging was that this was mandated growth, that this is what we were required to grow. So I just want to get clarity, and so Commissioner, the question is to you. Can you please clarify, what is the population we must achieve, not what you want to achieve or what anybody else wants to achieve, we must achieve, and how did you get to that number?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the must question, it relates to the 200 persons per job. So that's the minimum. So that's the must part. And then we go through an exercise, and we have the mandated growth for Oakville, and we go through the exercise of dividing that up over in line with the council, the livable Oakville urban structure. So we distribute that over the urban growth centers. And so they're forecasts. They're not intended to be anything but tools to use for infrastructure planning. So the 2051 is a very important date in the estimates that we have for population employment for transportation. And beyond that, we need to plan the pipes. The pipes need to accommodate beyond 2051. So in terms of considering those numbers as mandates, they're outputs of an exercise, and they're not inputs. So you don't design to the forecast, you design to your desires and ambitions for the area, what's appropriate given the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure, what you have to achieve on a larger scale across the municipality. And as long as you're true to those forecasts, that's your test. I guess it's a test. Do the densities proposed, do they achieve the forecasts? If they're less than the forecast, then you've got problems with transportation and likely water, wastewater, or stormwater. So it's really a test. It's not something you use as a tool to cap or density. It is a statement of fact, as we said on the 15th.
So I think I want to unravel that a tiny bit for myself. So we are required to have a minimum of 200 people and jobs per hectare. That's the requirement. We then have mandated growth that comes from where?
So it's established through the provincial growth plan into the region's official plan. So we have a big number for the town.
Correct.
Through the
which the joint planning estimates spread that across, with some level of estimation.
Correct.
But that was not what we're required to do, but rather how we would distribute that across SGAs,
What
correct?
we can reasonably expect, given the infrastructure that's planned or in place, or the local conditions. For instance, Midtown has the heavy rail. You can expect higher density there versus a place like the hospital of Palermo.
So at 32,000 people and 16,000 jobs, we exceed what that 200 people and jobs per hectare. We certainly, that number gets you to 2051 possibly and beyond. We exceed what the province requires. So I guess what I want to understand is then, you know, you say that it's an output, but it was the exact number that each of the concept had, and not one of the concepts gave us anything different. And so it's not just an output, it was a given. So one of my asks tonight, one of the delegates told me to make sure my January list is on the table. One of my asks tonight is that the renderings do not just speak to 32,000 people and 16,000 jobs, and then ultimately what somebody's projected as a build out to 62,000, but that we get additional renderings that speak to what would be just 2051, because there's a sense that we are being told what our population has to be greater than what is required. And if I take you back to May 23rd of this year, 6 months ago, one of the biggest frustrations the public, and there was more than 400 people plus people online, said is that the density is too much for 43 hectares. And that the FSI is driving something that we don't have to achieve, and B, is not optimal for 43 hectares of land. The intent of the committee was to try and get at those answers. So I would really ask on behalf of residents who've asked me, residents associations, that we get not just one preferred rendering, but rather we get a rendering that also speaks to what must we do, not just what you think we have to do. Because I think that is part of the choices that we as councillors and as residents need to make, not the consultants, not the town planning staff. So that's my one ask. In regards to the workshops, if you keep clapping, I'll get in trouble, so don't do that, okay? The workshops, say, Closey?
If I could just add a point of clarification. You're asking what is mandated. You're absolutely correct. The growth plan requires a minimum of 200. But the province also requires that at a regional basis, we plan for a population. So that's a mandated population that is given to us, from the province to the region. The region then mandates to us what is our population. We then have an urban structure that says, we want growth to occur in these areas, so we've taken that growth and distributed. So in many ways, the population, the 30,000, I'll just simplify the number, is a mandated population. If you're intending on meeting your provincial requirements, your regional requirements, and your own official plan in terms of urban structure. So the numbers that you have, I would more characterize them as mandated requirements. The minimum they set for at the provincial level for Midtown. But we have to plan for that much larger number, and we've translated that larger number down to what is required to meet that mandated population in Midtown.
So if a rendering comes back with 32,000 and 16,000, then we've achieved what you have said is potentially the mandated number.
It is the mandated number that we're coming back with. And we'll look in terms of what it translates itself to be. At the same time, though, you need to be able to accommodate growth going forward. So you have to provide some flexibility in that. So we'll look at the numbers that we can come back with. But my point actually of standing up was saying, I don't want you to assume that the numbers that we've come out in the joint best planning estimates are not required numbers. They are in essence required numbers that you have to plan to meet by 2051. How you're going to continue to grow and change as a municipality is what you need to also consider when you fold in those numbers.
Well, thank you for that, because that's a great segue. So the OPA, in some of the presentations, there's been comments about how we can come back and revisit an OPA in 5 years or 7 years or whatever. So one of my asks on the rendering is to not blow this out to what you think potentially could happen, albeit I understand the pipes, at 60,000 need to be built correctly. If we have the opportunity to revisit this, or councillors in the future, then we don't need to build an OPA with the level of permissions that potentially you have in the concepts. So again, I'm asking for a rendering which reflects what we must do, what allows us to honor our commitments from a population responsibility from the province, and as I've been told tonight, the region. But I'm also I think it's important the public get more than one rendering, because this is a little bit of hard to visualize. And when you see what's going to happen in 2051, I think people will have some comments for you that will be fairly powerful, depending on where you end up with in terms of FSI. So if we have an opportunity to revisit it, I'm suggesting to you that revisiting needs to be a factor in how we get to a final OPA.
Madam Chair, if I could just clarify, are you looking for a time series? What will be built based on our forecasts? What will the look and feel be in 2031, 41, 51? So you can see the progression of that? Or are you looking for a land use concept that caps at 2051? Just for clarity as we consider how we build that.
So thank you for asking for clarity. I think my expectation was that we would, A, always get more than one preferred, B, that in that preferred, you are showing us what we must do, not just, and then as one of the residents associations said, so what does 60,000 look like? I mean, if you're going to show me 2051, are you going to show me this other number that is out there in the universe that we some of us truly question? So I think I'd like you to show us both, a time continuum.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll take that back under advisement. I will add that our transportation planning runs 30 years, but our water, wastewater infrastructure runs much broader than that, because we want to rebuild our pipes. So I guess with that caveat, we will take that back and see what we can do.
Well, the 2021 servicing plan projected 60,000 people and jobs. And it projected at heights of 20 stories. It didn't project what the concept says. So I understand we need to get it right for the pipes, because who wants to dig up Trafalgar Road how many times? But I think it's important that you give us not like this visualization, because that's one of the concerns the public has is, what is it we're really going to approve in these permissions? Because some of the language tonight said, you're going to come back and, when we look at the planning tools and we look at planning applications, it is what is in force policy. So I come back to my worry in May. My worry in May is, what are we approving in that OPA language? And all I have right now are concepts in front of us. I want to make sure that, we're not building an OPA on a concept which one of the residents association probably framed correctly. We don't know if it's the preferred. It's just, one that they lean to more. It really, having watched the workshops, it was framed, it was supposed to be identifying the elements that people liked and not a vote. And when you heard tonight, people felt they were voting for something. And it is not a vote. It was meant to be a, what are the elements within those concepts you like? So, but I won't belabor it, because people have given you their feedback and they experienced it. I want to come back to parks, because while I was super excited when I saw the amount of green space, and I appreciated that it didn't calculate in slivers and connectors and promenades as green, how will you ensure that OPA protects and supports the delivery of that vision? Because what you've given us tonight is something we said more than a year ago, that we need a parkland acquisition strategy. So is there more than that you're going to come back to us with?
Perhaps, through you, Madam Chair, perhaps Lee can expand on what might be in the OPA. I can say is that through other plans, we set an objective for urban growth centers in terms of the amount of parkland, the percentage of parkland, which we're establishing, working towards. How we achieve that is subject to a very specific, as you referred to, a very specific strategy for Midtown. How are we going to achieve those parkland ambitions? In terms of the OPA, I think Lee.
So the official plan, through you, Madam Chair, the official plan amendment will include schedules, identify location of parks. We're working through exactly what that language may include, if it's, we want to align with the nomenclature that's emerging through the other process around parkland, so we're not creating new definitions. Policies that would indicate that development is expected to contribute to parks and open space subject to legislative requirements. So that's, what's achievable through parkland dedication bylaws, and then enabling other opportunities through the parkland acquisition strategy. As we've talked about in the past, what's being shown in terms of what can be extracted through development may not meet what the town's vision is for how much parkland you'd like to have over the long term. But in terms of what the OPA will do, we'll set up the framework for what it is you want to achieve. And identify those so that expectations for landowners are clear about what they're intended to deliver. And Jeff, if you want to add about the acquisition strategy.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the municipal land acquisition strategy is being done as part of Phase 6. So, the OPA sets the vision and the principles that then get fed into these other studies and other technical pieces of work that we're doing. And so as Lee had mentioned, there's parkland dedication and items that come out of the OPA, and then there's pieces that are sort of, I wouldn't say shortfall, but additional pieces of parkland that we may desire as part of building the community, and that'll be looked at through the municipal land acquisition strategy next year.
I fully understand that, Jeff. I mean, it's no surprise to us. We've said that for the longest period of time. I was looking for, can you actually in the OPA say this parcel of land is to be park?
So through the schedules, I think we'll identify the preferred locations for parks. Ultimately, it's through a development process that comes through, and it's a negotiation with the applicant at the time. But I think we can, as is done in many policy documents in areas like Midtown, identify what those locations are, what the intent is. If this is I'm just going to say park type A, because I'm not sure exactly what the nomenclature is. It should be around this size. It should have this type of function. And then those expectations are clear.
So,
Madam Chair, just to augment, the land use schedule is an operative part of the official plan. So if it has the designation of park, it would take some kind of application to change that designation. That's the way it typically works. And you would perhaps wrestle that out at the OLT with the affected party, where you can negotiate settlement of whatever that might be, an acquisition, or council would be in charge of that process.
okay, well, so that's a little bit clearer than what we just heard. So we could say this is the area that this is going to be on a park. And then it does become a dispute of whether or not the landowner feels that is fair in their view.
That's correct.
Okay. And so then I guess my other question about parks is that we have a parks plan and we have a parks rec library master plan. One of the things we asked for back in May was that they be an integral part of forming the OPA. So I'd like to hear, what do we put at risk of not achieving from those master plans? Because Staff have not reported back out the Parks Rec Master Plan, the Transportation Plan, and a few of those others that are now pushed down the road.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the master plan establishes the programming in any given park space. So the idea of missing out, I'm not sure that that's the application of a master plan. The application is how do you use the park space. So I don't think there's a jeopardy. They're moving in tandem, of course. Director Mark is part of all our discussions, and he can provide shape and guidance on the form, the function of that, what it might be in terms of the programming, though it's not mission critical to have that approved prior to approving a land use plan.
So then, if the Parks Plan is approved as it is, not the Parks Rec Master Plan, but if the Parks Plan is approved as it is it binding on Midtown?
I'm sorry, the Parks Plan, could you repeat the question? I got my plans mixed up.
Okay, so the Parks Plan is what all the different kinds of parks are. It's not the programming piece, which is the Parks Rec Master Plan. So if we approve the Parks Plan, is it binding on Midtown?
So the Parks Plan, I might have to defer that question. I'm not exactly sure about that one. It instructs about what we consider, what council needs to consider when you're talking through the development applications. Certainly it influences those types of decisions. In terms of the OPA, I'm not, I would have to get back to council on that one just to confirm.
Okay. Last two questions, and I'll pass over to someone else for.
If you could just wait, I think Director Charles has some words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to just build off what Commissioner Garvey was saying, with our Parks Plan 2031, that's our strategic document, which is really helping us inform, we're helping to inform how the parkland dedication bylaw is going to be structured. Really, how is the town going to be, or the tools that the town can use to acquire parkland. As part of the Parks Plan, we have what I'll call a hierarchy for urban park types. And those types are really trying to say, these are how you can categorize your parks that will help support the community. There's a range to the sizes. So does it become binding? It becomes, I wouldn't say it's binding, it helps inform how we then develop the subsequent pieces to Midtown. So as you've heard with the overall implementation program, there is a public realm component that's built into that, the streetscape studies as well. Those all build off of the direction that council provides through the adoption of the Parks Plan. So I don't know that I would necessarily say it's binding. You can only do certain types of parks. It's giving us a playbook for how we can look at overall parks in urban context.
But from a parkland dedication bylaw perspective, if it's defined as a park in the Parks Plan, then it is part of their contribution based on the parkland dedication bylaw.
Through you, Madam Chair, the parkland dedication bylaw at this point is really, and as council saw in the draft that we had presented earlier, is really a reflection of what the Planning Act has now given us. The Planning Act through Bill 23 has really removed the real flexibility that council may have had before in terms of the acquisition. It's really saying these are the ratios and the metrics that you have in terms of acquiring land or cash in lieu of land. So that's really what the parkland dedication bylaw will do. And the Parks Plan is that overarching approach for how we're dealing with parkland across the municipality.
Okay, but I still come back to, if it's defined as a park in the Parks Plan, then when they go as a developer to look at what their assignment to us of park, they will have the opportunity to potentially use something defined like a sliver or a promenade as part of that. If I am incorrect, I would be very happy, but I would ask that you clarify that in writing.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Chair. That is what you will see through the creation or getting to a recommended concept is describing those larger park sizes as they're listed in that, the typology that's in the parks plan. When you start getting into those much smaller park types, council may recall we have terminology such as sliver parks or pocket parks. Those tend to be those very small parks or parklets that end up being created as a result of development going forward. So in some cases, it could be leftover space, which we can take to add to or to augment the overall park system. It's not to say it's in lieu of the larger parks. There's a range of parkland types as we presented in the parks plan, but it wouldn't necessarily say it's exclusive to only those.
Okay, thank you for that. One of the staff please report back to us on what the projected density per square kilometer will be for Midtown based on when you give us these renderings. I'd like to understand what the projected density is per square kilometer further to one of the presentations tonight, because she is correct that currently Oakville is at 1,538.5 square kilometers in population density. It is higher than Vaughan. It is 3 times as high, 4 times as high as Pickering. It is much higher than Whitby, and it is higher than Burlington. So we are taking more than our fair share of growth, and there is an opportunity to balance it.
Thank you. Councillor Elgar and then Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the Jacobs Consultants. A few questions. One of them was they spent quite a bit of time talking about affordable housing. I'd like to know what your definition of affordable housing is in your presentation.
Through you, Madam Chair. So in terms of a definition similar to the deputant that presented earlier today, we know that the province is working through its own definitions of what affordable or attainable housing may be. So, the town has an obligation to follow suit in terms of working definitions as they emerge. But in terms of what the tools that I described, inclusionary zoning is a tool that the town can put into place in a major transit station area in order to secure affordable housing. That would be defined according to the definition in place at the time. I understand generally affordable housing to be, as you mentioned, no greater than 30% of your income. And I don't have a detailed definition other than that to provide, other than, we would continue to reflect what the current definition of affordability is in terms of the other plans that we have to conform to and reflect that.
The only reason I say that, back Councillor Noel and I were both around in the early 2000s when they talked about north of Dundas, and everybody thought this affordable housing was coming. Somehow the wheels fell off that. So yeah, and even when you're talking tonight, I'm thinking, not sure people are understanding what you really are saying. You're not saying it's 30% of income or 80% of the average cost of a house. You don't know, I guess, at this point. Now, you gave us an education through all different planning documents, and that's great. Can you just explain to people, if there's anybody watching, what happened when the province introduced Bill 23 along with the park dedication and what we're allowed to take compared to what we used to take?
Through you, Madam Chair, in terms of what comparison from what the town used to be able to take versus what's here today, I don't think that I'm the best person to answer that question.
Okay.
And I would defer to Mr. Garby.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
If you want specific numbers, maybe Gabe can give it to that, but it's a lot less. It's less. Bill 23, the impact of Bill 23 is that it reduced the tools we're allowed to apply to things like the number of hectares per number of units. Gabe, do you have the specific?
Through you, Madam Chair. The alternative rate that we had before was 1 hectare per 300 for units, which is what we used with high density developments, and that was for cash in lieu. The standard rate is at 5%. what Bill 23 did was it essentially cut that in half. So it's now 1 to 600 in terms of dedication, and 1 to 1,000 in terms of cash relief. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. It was 1 to 500 on cash, 1 to 300 on land. With the other thing with Bill 23, what it did is, notwithstanding that it cut the ratio in half, it also capped it as well. So at 10% for developments less than 5 hectares and 15% for developments over 5 hectares.
So if we, like going forward, either we have a lot less parkland or the taxpayers are going to have to pay for it, is the way I read it. Am I correct on that? Like, I don't know where does the money come from?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is the conundrum that we are wrestling with the overall parks plan, and what are the tools that the municipality could explore in the alternative if we're not able to get it through the development process. So is it purchasing land elsewhere? Is it looking at contributions to the municipality? Or are we taking land in a different fashion rather than just fee simple? So for example, through POPs, which are publicly accessible, privately owned spaces. Is it through stratification agreements where the municipality may own land and below the park could be storm tanks, parking garages, those types of things. So looking at other opportunities for how to acquire park land.
Gabe, I appreciate what you're saying, because I do feel we as a council sitting here, we're doing the best we can, or trying to, and the province is not getting the feedback that, hey, you're going to have an impact on taxpayers, whether they don't have the parks or whether the taxes are going to go up from a municipal level. So I appreciate that. I thank you. The one last question was, I wonder if C.I. Closey could tell me the report that the region has that goes beyond 2051, because I was only aware of the 1 to 2051 with 1.1 million people in the region. And I think I heard there is another report, and I'd just like to get confirmation.
No, and I'll try not to cough. But no, there is no other report after that. There is just the numbers that the province had required to the region.
Okay, so it is just the 1.1 million still. You don't have numbers past that. I guess is what Councillor Theo was talking about, and you're saying, well, no, you're going ultimate build out, but we only have numbers to 2051.
That's right, and we have to plan to accommodate it. So in accommodating, you have to anticipate market and all of those other kinds of things in terms of what you can actually achieve by the year of 2051.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through you, Chair Duddick. I'll just pick up on Councillor Elgar and a few others on the inclusionary zoning. I think in the overview of affordable housing, we heard from a few delegates as well. I think we're going to have to throw every tool at it possible, and some of the rental protections that are in place are not. I mean, there's currently no rental, as far as I know, in Midtown. So a tool like inclusionary zoning, I'm not too confident that pure supply is going to help us get to affordability, or that the development community might provide us affordable housing. I think that's a little bit wishful thinking. So I would like to, I guess, get to the point where we understand what is the terminology that needs to be in place. My understanding is that we need to have shalls, not may or consider, in some of our codes if inclusionary zoning is going to be a part of this protected MTSA. Otherwise, I think it's just going to remain optional. So that's on IZ, inclusionary zoning. I'll switch over to community planning permit system. It's certainly music to my ears to hear it so many times tonight, and I was delighted to see it in the slide on land use planning framework as well. My request would be that it was listed as a tool, but I'm of the opinion that it's a planning approval process. And down at the bottom of that slide that outlined the land use planning framework, it had the traditional process of official plan amendment, zoning, site plan, urban design in that kind of dashed box. But we're seeing it in Burlington, and I just read a guide and a handbook that Waterloo put together, and I think we're hearing about it more from the community because they're digging into it, and it's a tool that the housing minister even says is directly applicable and may be enforced in MTSAs. It's right on their website there. So I think that's a tool worth serious consideration. So I'd love to see some more attention and for us to understand if precincts or sections of The MTSA could benefit from this approvals process. Yeah, so I'd love to see a deeper dive into the CPPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a number of quick questions in terms of, so whoever is closest to the mic. The work done to date meetings, it has under public consultations, landowner meetings, and TAC and developers meetings. Those are public meetings. Do we have minutes on those or feedback in terms of what was discussed?
Through your chair. So those meetings are not public meetings. They're with our individuals, with the stakeholders and with the development communities. We will have their feedback documented and shared as part of our development and of our process, and it'll be documented, but we're not sharing direct meeting minutes from each meeting.
It will be documented, so it will come to us at some point.
Yes, the feedback will be documented and shared and how it was reflected in our concepts.
Great stuff, thank you. Page 4, where we are. As it was mentioned by a couple of other speakers this evening, January of 2025, it looks like we're going to have buildings, roads, and infrastructure, detailed design and construction. Do we have a chart for that? Is that condo buildings concurrent with servicing, with road work? Just looking for some sort of order.
Yeah, maybe just a point of clarity. So the indication on that slide or that page was to indicate that there's further phases that build out beyond our implementation program to actually construct. So there's more work from the town side for implementation in terms of detailed design and construction of municipal infrastructure. And then there'll be the developer side where they submit planning applications to then develop their land. So we're just showing a continuation of that process beyond 2025. It's not meant to show a specific process in which things get done.
I was going to say, pretty aggressive. All right.
Yeah.
Parks and open space. I appreciated the clarity on the Park Rec Master Plan and the Parks and Open Space through the OPA. On page 29, it had the official plan amendment can establish a vision and include schedules for potential locations and so on. We've had discussions on will and shall and various iterations in the past. My question is about can and whether it should be will.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can address that. At this point in the process, because we were just describing broadly what an official plan amendment can do, that was a deliberate choice in terms of the language. We were bringing back policy directions, which will describe our recommendations for what the official plan amendment will do in January. So I wanted to be a little bit more broad as to not predetermine what we'll be coming forward with. Frankly, we're still doing the work. So that we'll bring that as part of the preferred concept and policy directions in January.
And that would be the same for sustainability?
Correct.
Where it has
all of those
will
topics.
review feasibility, not quite as strong as will.
All of the topics were framed in the same manner.
Yep.
If we're on the secondary slide with regards to sustainability and the subsequent study, then that may be a different answer if that's what you're referring to, the energy study.
Yes.
So I think Jeff can describe that scope of work more in particular in terms of what that will be looking at, but the policies of the OPA will have more direct language when we come back in January with those directions.
Well done on that. I understand schools in terms of if they will be built. There was a lot of, in earlier presentations about higher education in Midtown, how it would be a great anchor, it would be, something that we should all look forward to. Any discussions, I guess, for staff, any discussions with universities or colleges, or do we have any interest in that, or I'm just curious where that is?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Oakville's had a history of being interested in expanding the presence of certainly Sheridan, among other things. And we haven't had any direct conversations lately with them about locating a campus in Midtown. But certainly if that's where we land with the OPA, that will be direction given to staff.
So what does that look like? Does that look like a placeholder in terms of a certain amount of space? Is it, what would that look like in an OPA?
So in the OPA, maybe Lee can describe it more, but it would be a general permission. But more specifically, as action to staff, we would go and actively market that. So the analogy might be Markham Center, which had permission in their secondary plan for post-secondary education, and they worked hard to attract York University to their downtown Markham.
All right, and with the discussions with Metrolinx, you know, we all saw the report in terms of the crossover and so on. Has there been any discussion in terms of their future parking needs, whether they're looking at structures? Because on three of the proposals, we had half a parking space per unit. And that, to me, is an aspirational goal that we will get to at some point when people move away from vehicles. Trying to be proactive in terms of predatory towing and what our friends in Bronte go through. Is that the kind of thing where Metrolinx would be interested in a garage that they would take over at some point when we get down to half a car per unit?
Through Mr. Chair, Metrolink actually holds two roles. They're a landowner, so your question is related, what do they want to do on their piece of land, whether they want to build a garage or any other type of use, versus they're also, of course, a stakeholder that we engage for transportation purposes. So Jacob has met with Metrolink to understand their interests as a landowner and what they're planning to do in the future. But it's only at the very preliminary discussions, similar to how we would meet with developers. And secondly, Metrolink is also doing a station master plan for the Oakville station. And we are in the midst of working with them as part of the staff team to review the station master plan. And at this point, they are not looking at creating a large parking structure beyond that's what's already there.
All right, and through you, Madam Chair, just curious, clarity for Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel's request in terms of a second rendering. Is that, do we need direction on that, or is that?
Commissioner Garvey, maybe you can provide some insight.
It's always helpful to articulate council's direction. So if you, that's my advice. If you've got specific wording that you would like to look at, because I think there's still some clarity that we need to, what I'm taking away is that we need a time series that shows the progression of the build out of the Midtown, as well as some clarification around the endpoint. So whether it's, what is that kind of build out number?
All right, thank you. I see Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel's hand is up, so.
Councillor Chisholm's a first-time speaker, so I'll go to him first. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question with respect to the status and explanation. I'd like to have clarity on this hydro corridor right away. I'm not sure the details on that, and if that's part of the parkland, I guess, inclusion. I just need to understand the hydro corridor through the 42 hectares. Is it a large piece? Is it a narrow piece? Or is there a hydro corridor in that area? I'd like to have clarity on that. And is it going to be part of the parks acquisition?
There is a hydro corridor. Through, I think we're all looking at each other through, Mr. Chair. So if hydro is actually one of our stakeholders, so then we do meet with them to confirm land requirements and what's considered hydro corridor and the exact boundaries. So the OPA would relatively reflect that, but certainly there could be potential permissions. And the hydro corridor is not currently included in any of the concept that you see. But certainly if there was any intention from the landowner perspective, they want to have anything, that they will work with us on that. But at this point, it's considered hydro corridor, and then it's what's designated as hydro corridor.
Well, I guess my question, maybe I wasn't clear. I'd like to know the size of, if there is a corridor, and how much green space is along there with respect to the hydro corridor. Do we have any idea what the specifications are?
Through you, Madam Chair, we do have that number. There is a hydro corridor there. It is owned by Hydro One. It's not included in our calculations of parkland, but we can certainly provide that number to the council.
In the issue list.
Yes, we can put that in the issue list, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to know how much land acquisition or property we can use for parkland through the corridor. Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Thea.
Thank you, through you, Chair Dudek. Just further to Councillor Giddings in that direction. So what we would be looking for is a rendering which shows the visual of Midtown at the required population out to 2051 as a timeline is what you've suggested, and we think that's a great suggestion. But we'd also like an alternative in terms of scale and density that continues to achieve the population target, but with lower FSI permissions, particularly along Cornwall, with more variety in housing type and in the areas surrounding parks. So if you need that in writing, I can try and pull it up. I've got it in here. So that is, from a renderings perspective, I think what would be most beneficial for the community to be able to give you comments towards moving us forward. The other request I'd have for January's meeting is the actual schedule for this phase 5, because there's a series of action items in future studies in phase 5, and it's really not clear which is going to come first, second, and third, and then just clarity on who's doing what. So is it internal to some of the staff, or is it all Jacobs? I don't need an answer tonight, but it would be good to have that like, I don't want to hear end of December 24. I'm wondering what is the, is this the first quarter, the second quarter, so we have a sense of what's coming at us. In terms of the, just two other follow-ups. So you talked about what the OPA could have in when you were going through the planning lesson, and then what zoning. And just for clarity, is it your intent that the OPA will speak specifically to height and density, and we're not going to rely on just our zoning bylaw? Because you say it, additional detail on height and density on the zoning bylaw, and I don't think we want wiggle room.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's my expectation that the OPA will speak to both height and density in the policy framework, and in terms of what the zoning does, just draws it down to a more site-specific level.
Okay. One of the residents asked and suggested and came back to why we don't have a phasing strategy, or when we would get a phasing strategy. And on your chart, the phasing strategy is, I think, in, way down the road. Can you come back and advise us in January what could be phased in the development, or after you have a concept that everybody's kind of coming around to, how you would phase that? Can you come back to us with that?
Through Madam Chair, no, we cannot provide you the phasing strategy in January. The purpose of the phasing strategy is to indicate it's all related to infrastructure. So what we do is that we will work with the development industry to figure out who goes first, second, and third. Then we'll figure out where the roads and the storm sewers and all the pipes need to be built first, second, and third, because Midtown is not going to be built over one day. So the phasing strategy is going to be evaluated through the period of time, sometimes in 2024, with the development industry in terms of timing. So we will not be able to provide you the phasing strategy in January.
I wasn't really asking for the phasing strategy. I was asking whether or not we could have an explanation of what we could phase in the development, and what those options, and I don't need it in January, but I would like to understand how you would see us phase it out before we make a decision on the OPA.
Sorry, can I just clarify, do you mean the phasing of how the density and the height will happen over time, or are you, because I think my phasing definition is related to infrastructure, and I think your phasing definition is related to how the area could look like over time, 10-year chunk at a time. Is that what you're referring to for clarity?
I'm referring to is there options around certain precincts would go first or second, or and how could that evolve? Because it might take some of the, it would just give some clarity around how you see it go. Do I think you can do that by January? No, but I think that giving us some insights into that would be helpful.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll do our best. It is related to the infrastructure, so the timing and coordination of infrastructure to the development. So if it's the water, wastewater goes up to a certain point, which allows this block of land to develop first. You want some kind of notional idea as to how the development will progress through the development area. That's what I'm taking away.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, Councillor Giddings was asking about the stakeholder meetings and the feedback. So when you said we will get the feedback that is coming out of these one-to-one meetings and with the public sector and the developers, are we actually going to see the content of what was discussed, or are we just getting a summary document?
It's true. Madam Chair, you will be obtaining a summary document of the comments that we receive from our stakeholder engagement. It would not highlight which developer said what or which stakeholder said what.
Yeah, I don't need who said what, but I just think, you know, we spent a great deal of time talking to the residents, but you haven't afforded us as a committee the opportunity to participate and hear from the other stakeholders, and they are an equal part of how we have to make a decision, and it's regrettable because I would certainly welcome hearing their perspective and their suggestions. So at least we're going to get that feedback, and I appreciate that. I have one other request, and that is that when you do the summary of the workshops, could you give council the courtesy of giving it to us before you distribute it to the public? Because this morning at 10 o'clock this morning, there was a document that was released through the Midtown email to the public. It is not on our agenda tonight. It was never circulated to members of council. And it does speak to what one of the residents said. There's a level of disrespect about how and what our role is and what we're trying to accomplish. And so if you could give us the courtesy of giving us the information in advance, I would certainly appreciate it.
Okay, if we got any further speakers, Mayor Burton, I saw your hand go up and down several times. I don't know if you want it. Okay, you're fine. Okay. Councillor Longo, your motion is still in order that the report entitled Midtown Program Planning Policy Tools be received for information. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much for all your time and your participation.